Hey, welcome back to Métropole Grid. My name is Andre. Thanks so much for tuning in. It is, I don't even know what date it is. March 12th, 2024. It's a bit of a mess around here, I'll be honest. Hopefully you're doing well. How's scoop season been so far? We're halfway through it, not even, maybe less than half. And I am underwater. So off the top, I want to say a couple things. Firstly, there are going to be no scoops here besides talking about existing scoops. So that's tomorrow. It's leg day. Spoonfunk, how's it going? It's gonna be a bit of a shorter stream today on the basis that I still don't have finished the video for tomorrow, in which we reveal some stuff that's hopefully coming out in the morning. The way things are going, maybe it's not the morning, I don't know, but I'm still behind on schedule. I had to wake up earlier today just to finish recording. So like I just got off finishing recording for the part of the video in which we talk about the cards, and then I will finish this stream, which won't be as long as the normally is, just to get back to editing, and hopefully everything works out and nothing destroys. No stop stream, only continue a video editing stream. I honestly wish I could do a video editing stream, because I think showing off how video stuff works in motion is like kind of cool, and I'm doing some fun enough stuff. The problem is I do not have the computer that will be able to run After Effects and do the stuff I do. Barely is able to do that sometimes, let alone stream at the same time. So it's a bit of a bummer. I wish I could. I'd need a 2 setup. I know there are no planned scoops, but I'll be damned if I'm not looking for a signed Patrick hit somewhere. Yo, Cold Lava, how's it going? That's the thing that I'm really worried about. It's like Patrick went out of his way, and this is like a really clumsy topic, but Patrick went out of his way to make sure that he could be on stream tomorrow, or on Thursday, excuse me. Oh, speaking of Patrick, Patrick's going to be on Daily Casts tonight, if I'm not mistaken, so check those out, which is sick. But he went out of the way to make sure that he'll be on stream on Thursday, and like for the last couple spoiler season, he's really goofed on a stream on Thursday. So like I can't promise he's gonna do it, because obviously I have no idea what's happening, but he made his effort, so that's the best I can do. But anyways, Patrick's gonna be on Daily Cast tonight. If we haven't shouted out Daily Cast, mind you, Sengren's been doing this fantastic job having guests on to talk about the cards revealed that day. So what's been revealed today so far? The process, I saw a bunch of HB cards. What else is on the docket for today? I reckon also we'll be talking, or they'll be talking, mind you, about Anarch cards that, oh no, it's Wednesday. What happened yesterday? Because there's a bunch of stuff on Monday. When am I? Yesterday was Monday, right? Wait, it's Tuesday. Oh, okay. So the Monday stuff. So that's going to be, mind you, Neon Static. Thank you, Maddie. I don't know where I am. I'm a mess. Let me tell you, I'm a mess. Let me just catch up on chat. Sophie first. Lol. Welcome, Darjin. Hello. Les francophones sont les premiers d'aujourd'hui. Haha. Sophie, est-ce que tu peux parler un peu de français? I didn't know that. Maybe. How's it going, Dajan? Hopefully you do well. Hopefully you're enjoying spoiler season. There's been some fun stuff out there. Cinder and Seamer, good morning. Hey friends, how's it going? Are we in the wrong category today? We're just chatting about scoops all stream, right? Yeah, maybe we should just move the category over, because we're definitely not gonna be playing any games today. It's not gonna be the longest stream, but there's a lot to talk about. Like, it feels like it's been a year since our last stream, and just talking about the scoops is definitely really fun, as much as there have been really good platforms for that. Hey Ronha, how's it going? Claim, maybe scoops? No, not exactly today. Yo, Jenkivis, how's it going? Perfect timing for a lunchtime stream. Enjoy your lunch. Hopefully you're doing well. You were on a Daily Cast the other day, right? HB stuff, if I'm not mistaken. I thought it was really funny, right? I haven't caught up on all of these so far. I'm missing some parts of it, but the fact that like a lot of the people talking about the HB stream with the new identity are just like HB fundamentalists that were just like, I don't know about this. It's really fun. It's the praise of having an amazing production value like you do. Oh, thank you, Diagen. That's very kind. It's a fair bit of work, unfortunately. And then like render times, if they fail, like you're just kind of in a bad spot. It's hard to fix it. Izzy, how's it going? Cody also, what's up, folks? How you doing? That blur on stream and editing, what editing software do you use? I'm not sure what blur you're talking about, but in terms of streaming software, I just use OBS for editing. Largely, if it's motion graphics, is After Effects, and if it's just putting stuff together, is Premiere, so the Adobe Suite. Today is Tuesday. Oh, Flip, I know, thank you. There's a crim spoiler on some social media, Twitter, better platforms. I don't know about that. So if you're not plugged in, mind you, we have a lot of stuff to go through, but specifically, I think Michael has been putting together this list that has all the places that spoilers are coming out. So if you go to the preview schedule, you go here, we're on Tuesday. So Slumscast, I don't know if it's out yet. I haven't listened to it. I listened to the processed over breakfast, which is great. Those are a bunch of UK players and they have 4 HB cards, which is pretty wild. So there's probably some smaller stuff like that you would see on socials and stuff like that. There might be some stuff out today that I don't know of. So just so we understand that we're on the same page, generally during the week, I don't like opening this. Like, I'm not going to open Neon Static, and we're not going to watch Neon Static's video on our stream. And that's because I want you to go watch Neon Static. So a lot of the cards we're going to be discussing today and a lot of the spoiler stuff is going to be from the official stuff, so NSG stuff. So there's definitely some stuff to talk about. But I'm a big proponent of having you spend your time going to their channel and talking in their discussion section. And then next week, obviously, when everything is out, we can talk about the stuff. We can talk about it in abstract terms if you really think like, oh, did you see this card? We can talk about it. But at the end of the day, that's a really big thing here is go to other people, go to Balram Woo's stream and, you know, type your comments in there. Definitely what you want to be doing. So we're not going to be like opening and looking at other stuff too much. Hey, Milnomi. Yesterday we got 2 utility programs, Pretty Mary and the rest of Seb's toolkit. Yeah, seeing more Seb's card is really important. We'll talk about Seb stuff, but I've been in some ways a bit it's weird. I think NSG's been doing this really strange job with some of their preview articles, right? So obviously we'll be diving into this, but like NSG revealed Sebastião Souza Pessoa, which again, we'll be talking about more of this in depth, but it obviously cares about connections and no surprise, cares about tags and probably not going tag me, as I think you can still go tag me. And then they revealed 2 2 events that care about tags that work with Sebastião. But I feel like this is the second day in a row where like NSG has revealed an identity, but hasn't revealed the sort of payoff cards that I think make the identity make sense. Like, I think it's important. There's a lot of things you need to do in Sebastião. You need to be able to get tags, and obviously you need to be able to clear tags, but you also clearly care about connections, and then they don't reveal any connections on the page itself. I think this was worse for Weyland, when they revealed the Weyland ID and then showed 2 cards that, like, honestly don't make that much sense in the Weyland ID, right? Like, I thought we would see more things that make sense. It's just like, here's the thing, and then they don't show you the payoff, which maybe that's good because we're plugged in more for the rest of, like, scoop season, but I feel like we've had a lot of, like, weird drops where it's like, here's the Weyland ID that cares about operations and expendable, and here's no expendable cards and like some strange operations that don't obviously work with the ID. It's been really strange and slightly frustrating. So I'm glad that we at least saw like Neon Static showed off some really powerful connection stuff that I would think showing alongside Sebastião would make more people excited about Sebastião. Cause yeah, it's just been strange. I don't know if it's scheduled like that on purpose or not, or if it's an oversight. Not gonna try and find the deck of the week Christmas magic. Hey London, I saw the replay. It's actually really cool. Tread Ping Ping, how's it going? I'm behind on chat, excuse me. Furniture respect and all-time high so far this scoop season. I've been keeping my eye out. Oh, really, Niall? In terms of who's destroying furniture? I think we might have called Shaper. What do we call HB as the most wordy cards? The Anarch cards have been really wordy so far. And there's a lot of text in the background too, which unfortunately we put ourselves in that corner. Oh, on that note, really quickly, I know I'm behind on chat, but we did accidentally spoiled this card by title on the stream on Thursday because we did a Netrunner on Null Signal Games' website and we could find the full art from this called An Eye for an Eye from Benjamin Galletti. We found it, we did it on stream, felt a bit weird about it, but at the end of the day, it actually turned out to be 2 things that are really importantly. Firstly, I knew this was a card that NSG was going to spoil sooner than later, so I promise you, if this was a card that was a community spoiler, I would not have been as belligerent and revealed it ahead of schedule, at least revealed the art, I promise you that. But more importantly, I heard back from NSG that the fact that we scraped NSG on stream to get this art and get the title of the card, their response was, thank you for doing that because it revealed some other issues that you could scrape other unrevealed cards on our website and we've gone and fixed it. So officially I'm on Sonny LeBeau's team, which feels good because we did scrape their website, which is great. HB fundamentalist. Yo, big Earthborn Rangers news with Maxime Newman. MJ, yeah, hopping on his lead designer, might need to pick up ER sooner than I thought. I've stalled out on Earthborn Rangers just because we haven't had enough time to play it because I've been very busy for better or for worse, but I'm on day 14 and I'm really, really enjoying it. I was surprised that MJ joined that team. I don't know if there's like a non-competition clause. I don't think there are. I don't think those are really enforceable, but there's like a lot of real references that a lot of the FFG team and like those sorts of folks that have definitely worked together. There's a lot of respect. Shout outs to the location in Earthborn Rangers that's called Michael's Bog, which I think has to be a reference as well. I think that's really, really cool. And on that note, this exists now, which is sick. I've managed to play 2 scenarios from it on 2 separate campaigns, me and my partner, and then me and my friend group. We finally got a game in on Monday night, and let me tell you, yeah, it seems like such a nice breath of fresh air, because for as much as I don't like Scarlet Keys, this is just so cool so far. So if you're getting into Arkham right now, let me tell you, so far Hemlock Vale seems like a huge success. Oh, Flesh and Blood's thing's gone up. Scoop the sick card. Oh, cool. Flesh and Blood, mind you, watches the Metropole Grid. They generally do Flesh and Blood content, as you know the name. I I don't think we're going to show that because it's a community spoiler. Go to X Flesh and Blood X on Twitter. You can find it. Mind you, they teased it on Reddit like many moons ago. So excited getting a copy of Earthbound Rangers. Waiting till the end of the year is going to be brutal. Is that the only when they're reprinting it, Izzy? It's going to take that long? That's a bummer. Neon Static stream was real fun. Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing yet. I watched a bit of it not live so far. I'm like halfway through, but seeing cards hit the table in person is an absolute treat. And not only for like us, but like for a lot of folks at NSG. I know I got this feedback once because we did an early stream where we printed out spoilers many moons ago and played them with Patrick. But for a lot of NSG folks, they were like, that's the first time I saw something I've been working on for like, you know, a year in person. And it's like really gratifying. So that's very cool for multiple reasons. So totally cool. Check that out, mind you. Neon Static streamed on Monday night. Do you mind if I post a link to Crim Scoop then? You can do it. Yeah, Cold, you can try. I'll see if Twitch lets it. But if you post that person's Twitter account and you go to that Twitter account, I'm totally fine with that. Been a hot minute since I caught your stream. Fedorus, how's it going? Getting back into Netrunner with the new set coming. You picked a good time to get back into it. Welcome back. If you have any questions about Netrunner in general, obviously ask, but welcome. I'm behind on chat, but that's really exciting. Hot takes, let's go. Yeah, JM, how's it going? We got a lot of hot takes for sure. Privilege Access seems like a decent payoff card. There are already good connections to play. I agree. And I think Privilege Access is like, so far, one of the better Sebastio cards we've seen. I'm actually a bit concerned about this because we've seemed to have a rewind a bit on recursion. And so far, we've actually seen a fair few recursion cards in this set. Like a lot of recursion cards in this set so far, more than you thought I would. That kind of frightens me. I don't think we're like close to paperclip sort of levels, but this card is, I think, there's a lot going on this card. There's definitely a lot. Looking forward to the hot takes in the tier list video. Yeah, we're scheduled that, Grim. Jeff and I have time to get that down soon, so it'll be probably by the end of the month. Might be cool to do IDs at the very end. I don't know, Cody. Like, I think the IDs to me are the ones that you want to build around. So like, obviously we'll go through all the articles. Again, we're not gonna be streaming too long today, but showing off. Oh, we're actually gonna read this, mind you. This is a Pat story. I really like this one. But showing this off and then not showing any more expendable cards is really strange. I think it's really strange, right? And then specifically the cards that are shown here aren't necessarily like what are we doing with Hearts and Minds with Nuvum? They just seem so non sequitur. Like, oh, also here's another really cool card. God, the art on this is so good. And then here's another card that like sort of non sequitur as much as it's technically a better on tempo card in Nuvum, which is like saying I can pawn shop this card so it doesn't matter what it does, right? Like it's so strange. It caught me off guard to be like, okay, I still don't understand why I'm meant to be excited about this. You were meant to make me excited about this. And I'm excited about this because it's exciting, but I thought they'd be like, oh, cool, now I can start to build a Nuvum deck. But we literally are not going to start to build a Nuvum deck with these two cards we saw, right? It's just such a weird pattern. I feel like some of it's getting a critical massive payoff. Even if there's one or two payoffs, it's hard to see enough to make me want to play it. Cold Lava, sorry, I'm behind on chat. In terms of Nuvum or in terms of Sebastio? I feel like a lot of NSG design, a lot of really cool mechanics, but are really missing a piece or two. I wouldn't say that much. I think NSG is doing a really good job making like consistent packages, and making some of those consistent packages interesting enough to consider splashing is also a really cool thing. So like, I think this comes up a lot with like, I think ESSA's a really good example of it, is that ESSA decks have very good, strong internal packages that make a lot of sense. And I'd argue that if you had one or two more sabotage pieces, you'd be making more decisions with deck building. That's probably good, but I don't think in terms of power level it's necessary. But then also some of the ESSA sabotage cards or the core damage cards do even say play outside of ESSA. And I think that's a really cool line to balance, to be something like this makes sense for Sebastio, but also it's playable outside of Sebastio. I think we're going to see that for sure, which is kind of cool. I've come to also get upset they printed more cards. Oh man. You mean that they printed more Anarch cards not named Street Peddler? Oh, Street Peddler was a connection, wasn't it? White hat hackers. Do you have a white hat you can put on? I don't. I'm pretty sure the white hat, black hat terminology, people are using less and less because it's not like a great term, but yeah, 100%. Process Cast was really fun. Looking forward to hearing more from them. The Crim card was more bypass support, so maybe take Neon's advice and close your eyes that it can't hurt you. So worried about bypass, I'll be honest. Andre Navarro probably helped write whatever non-compete terms FFG designers are under. I don't think it'll be a problem. That's actually a really good point. New NPC article dropped this morning. Okay, hold on one second. NPC.games. Mind you, the new set or the upcoming first NPC thing is actually really soon. Let's just see what this is. New article. Who to watch? Whoa, cool. Who to watch? Neat. So NBC Vancouver will be the first event of the year to use the new set from NSG Rebellion Without Rehearsal. William Saka 234 Huang. From Vancouver, British Columbia. Notable finishes, all of them. Undisputed number one in the world. Mind you, William's been doing a lot of streaming this last week. It's been a lot of fun. Ian Rongi Dodge Moskovitz. Boston, Massachusetts. First at Cascadia. Coming back to stomp the Northwest. Charlie Santa McBride. Washington. Notable finishes, Asia Pacific Champion 2023. Fifth at Cascadia. Fifth at Intercontinentals. Dave Ghost Meat Lair. Back on the trail. BC local. This is really cool. Competition and NPC. It's also going to be streamed from my understanding. I don't have a link to that just yet, but it'll be streamed from my understanding. We're also somewhat in discussions to see if the video footage, depending on how good the stream goes, which I think is going to go good, we might also try and get the raw video footage and edit it together for the Metropole Grid. Again, I'm saying this probably sooner than I should. It comes down to whether it's possible or not, but we might get more video footage of this edited up on the channel at some point in the future. But until then, there's definitely going to be a stream, and looks like it's going to be a good stream. So we'll let you know what the link is, but this is really soon. This is on like the 23rd. So a couple days. I think a lot of people are going to tune in because it's the new set, of course. Sick. Slumcast is up now. We've got Drill Runner posts. Oh man, Slumcast refuses to show their cards, and then you have to listen to the podcast, which is good because the podcast is fine, but I know it rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and they like really lean into it in a way that I think a lot of people might like. I'm so surprised that they don't show you the cards in a way that makes sense. I think in order for us to get new flavors of recursion, we need to ban and rotate existing recursion. The thing is, like, NSG banned and rotated a lot of recursion stuff, like intentionally, and like, check out the Slumcast and not the Slumcast, check out the process, and specifically the process has an HB recursion card, which I'm surprised to see. As much as the Slumcast folks, I don't think are really into it because at least it's on tempo and kind of forces you forward the same way Spin Doctor is a bit different than anything else and it's a bit clumsy and trashable. I'm just surprised to see cards that do that sort of thing because I thought NSG design pushed away from it pretty hard. Yo, Neostack, how's it going? Congratulations on the stream. I wasn't able to catch it live. I saw a bit of it so far. And like, again, I said this early on the stream, playing with cards in person is super important, even for the NSG folks who haven't seen their stuff hit paper in forever. It's really, really great. I think the cards may have just been chosen to match the stories. Obviously, Pat wrote the vignettes before Scoop schedule are set. Oh, that's actually a good point. And maybe that's, I don't know. That's a weird thing. We're going to read the story today, mind you. Pat wanted me to read it. I said, you could read it on Thursday. He's like, no, you can read it. It's fine. I'd rather have that. And I really like the vignettes. And you're right. This is a vignette that works. This one, though, isn't a vignette that works. I don't think this one works with the story that well. Right? Like this one does, obviously. And this is the introduction of Nuvem, as much as the Nuvem introduction is a bit muddy in the story. And we can talk about that in a second because it is going to be attached to an upcoming story, I think. I'm really behind on chat. The new cards have been wild, and I've been catching up on your streams to get a feel on how the current feel of the game is. Sunset seemed to be a bold shakeup. Yeah, I don't know much about Sunset because I haven't really played much of it. Again, Sunset also is like more of an experiment than it is, you know, obviously competitive testing. But right now, Standard, I think, is in a really good spot, regardless of Sunset. AJ, how's it going? My earlier comment about payoff is just generally about releasing payoff without the ID. Okay, got it. I think some cards that already exist will receive the expendable type. You think they're going to add expendable to existing cards, Diogene? I don't think NSG has ever functionally eroded a card, especially in such a large way. Got a spylighter, best players. Yeah, it's cute. It's really cool. Current plans are Rain City, Netrunner, Twitch, which is linked at the bottom of the article, but that could change if need be. Okay, sick. That's really cool. Haven't yet been accosted by QTM agents today, so probably remove tag. If I realized Neon Static was going to play Seb during the reveal, I would have said it would have been my favorite part of preview season. Yo, let's go, Safer. How's it going, by the way? Yeah, seeing Seb hit the table is also like a thing a lot of people wanted to see, just to see like what Seb does, because Seb is very fascinating to see how Seb pays off and it plays and that sort of thing. Trojan's example of a type that spread to older cards. Yeah, but Trojan's just a subtype. It has no rules implications. Adding expendables to cards is like, it's easy to say any card that's hosted on a card gets Trojan, but adding expendable to a card means you have to actually add clause to text to cards, because every card that's expendable also has an expendable paid ability window on it. So I think just adding the expendable subtype doesn't make sense unless you add this, and then it's a really big power difference. For what it's worth, I don't think NSG did a good enough job advertising the Trojan change, and obviously it's incredibly important, but adding expendable to cards I think is a very, very, very big change. That's easy to miss. So I'd be really surprised. They added Trojans before, but I don't think adding expendable would be something they do. Yeah, that one seems a bit harder to sell. Adding Trojan is just a nice way to, I don't know, because expendability is not the clause as much as this text, more importantly. I saw a wild Seb turn one yesterday ending on 15 credits with only 2 cards spent. Yeah, like rogue trading, I think. Friend of a friend is a wild and exactly what the deck needed. Yes, exactly. Seb seems a bit clumsy, and then you need those sort of engine cards. And I think that's one of the cool things with Seb specifically too, that in some ways reminds me of some of my favorite runners, in which unassuming, weird, and clumsy econ cards can become backbone economy cards that you're really excited about. So the idea that Fall Guy is just Fall Guy, but when you play a Geist deck, Fall Guy becomes an economic powerhouse, is the same sort of thing, where you can see weird cards like Friend of a Friend, which are kind of pretty bad generically, but as soon as you put them into a Seb engine, make a lot of sense. Trojan was added to FFG cards, right? Yeah, Trojan was also added to FFG cards. Trojan was added unilaterally to a bunch of cards, even to NSG cards that didn't have it. Seb gonna get hypoxiaed so hard. Hey, Slimeox, yeah. That's the one thing that I'm really worried about Seb is like people are gonna rock up to Seb, like JNet casual competitive events as soon as possible because it's the new Anarch ID, and just play Reality Plus. Oops. 18 free credits. Oopsies, right? Like this is the first time the runner takes a tag. It doesn't matter who gives the tag. You'd assume that this would be written the first time that the corporation gives the runner a tag or whatever the appropriate wording here, but just play against Seb, play Reality Plus, gain 18 credits. Like this matchup seems so absurdly polarizing. I don't understand how it's going to feel good. I'll leave you all with the teaser. My own scoops on Thursday. Calliope, Pentaliamon, Aristotle. I was tempted to say Calliope as a joke. Jai, I don't know what any of that is, besides we're naming Greek stuff. Thanks, Andre. Started catching up 1.25 x speed last night with the absolute high point of our channel. Thanks to you, AdSafe, for so pumped for the Metropole Groups. Yeah, no, Eric is sick. I'm excited to catch up on it. Wasn't able to watch it live, but what I've seen so far is absolutely fantastic. Mind you, the numbers of like people tuning into stuff is absolutely so cool, and I'm so stoked about that, right? Like Ba also did a reveal stream and did it live, which is a really cool way to do it. I'm second guessing it, editing together a video. Should I just do it live? It's maybe a lot easier. But like the amount of people that are plugged in that are so stoked about Scoop season, like it's obviously incredibly infectious. So shout outs to like getting involved and maybe finding more content creators and doing sort of stuff that you haven't been done before. And maybe now you have a cool friend where you can hang out on Monday nights for both, I guess, Neon and Ba. So that's absolutely fantastic. And one of my favorite parts of Scoop season. Speaking of expendable, I was trying to find in the rules where the exception is to allow expendable cards to be played, since under normal circumstances, the card text is not active while not installed, and it's not an operation to be played with a basic action. I get how it works. I was curious how it's handled rules-wise or misunderstanding of the rules. I would argue that we're hitting a point where understanding where card text is relevant is actually quite difficult. And even for someone who's been playing the game for a while, I don't think it's very clear. Expendable cards work because they say they work. I think you can obviously be quoted something in the rules, and I'm not the biggest rules meister when it comes to like some of the niche interactions, but we're running into a bunch of cases where I think it's not very obvious how rules work. We saw an upcoming Weyland card that was spoiled on the ARG. I think shout out to Not Again for that one. That is a Weyland Ice that allows you to return this to your hand. Now that works when it's rezzed on the table, but it doesn't work from archives. And the question is why? Well, because card text isn't active in archives only when the card is rezzed. Cool. Okay. Then why can I advance this? This says you can advance this ice, but that card text isn't active unless the card is rezzed. But again, there's an exception in the rules that say that text like this supersedes the fact that the text is not active because the card is rezzed. So it's just rules that don't seem intuitive and other stuff. Like ambushes too, right? Like ambushes inherently have text that's active even when they're not rezzed, and that's attached to ambushes. Okay, but if you're saying cards don't access from archives, why do agendas fire from archives? Because card text on agendas fire from archives. Like Nightmare Archives, let alone it fires from archives. I know it's an agenda, or sorry, an ambush, but like the fact is that you can run into what's an annoying agenda that gives you a tag? What's that one called? The NBN one? Whatever, I'm just gonna find an old one because it's the one I can think of. But agenda card text, oh, this is an ambush. I guess they're all ambushes? Not all ambushes. Ikua? Tomorrow's headline, that's a good one. Yeah, it's definitely not an ambush. It's an ambush, probably. It's an ambush, okay. So Ikua fires from archives. Why? Card text shouldn't be active. But agendas are slightly different because agendas aren't rezzed ever. They can be installed face up, but they're not rezzed. And I think we're getting to a point, again, key thing, Maryland campaign, does it get shoveled back into your deck if it's not rezzed? A lot of new players will mess this up. I think we're at a point where it's very, very difficult to understand this, and is largely attributed because NSG is doing interesting design stuff, because they're making more cards that have more text that's relevant in more board states. And I think that's good, and I don't think we should change that. I think, though, as a player from the outside who probably should know this better, we're getting to a point where it's not very easy to parse. And I think it really serves to have some sort of templating that is obvious what text is relevant when the card is or isn't rezzed. I know I mentioned this before, and I'm not the biggest Ashes player, but in Ashes Phoenixborn, when a card is exhausted, so imagine to be tapped, its text is blank. But specifically formatting puts certain text in this one kind of designed box, and anything in a box of that shape, of that size, means that text is relevant even if the card is tapped. And I would argue that certain cards could benefit from text boxes or some sort of, and this is really hard because then you have to errata or change all the other existing cards and then Ashes remastered. But there should be some sort of a very obvious thing to players of what text is relevant when the card is or isn't rezzed. Because right now it feels to me like we're getting to a pile of rules states that just say, cause the rules say that way. Like, why can I advance an ice wall when it's not rezzed? Because the rules say you can. And like, that doesn't feel great to me. And again, the rules team is doing a fantastic job. And that's the problem, is I feel like these sort of things are more accentuated because the rules team is doing such a good job, kind of ironing all of the other problems that don't exist just because the rules say they do. It's a weird thing, and I think should be addressed because there are weird spots where it's not very obvious why things should fire and why they don't. I need to figure out what exactly the deals with YT. I've never done a premiere, Eric, and I'm scared of doing YouTube premieres. I don't know if they always work out. Can you set up a YouTube premiere for your video tomorrow? I don't think I will because I don't know when it's going to come out. There's a big chance it'll be a couple hours late because I still have to work on it tonight. And if it doesn't come out on time, right? I can't commit to it, unfortunately, Joe. I wish I did. But saying that Art Visage does mention Trojan, so it's not a subtype that isn't played with. That is the only card that mentions Trojan, and obviously it's incredibly important, but it doesn't inherently change what the card does. Same thing, yeah. Why does expendable work? Because the rules say it does. Rules say if an ability could only work from a location where the card would normally be inactive, then the ability is active. That makes expendable work. If an ability could only work from a location where the card would normally be inactive, the ability is active. So basically, if we've created something that doesn't make any sense, unless it makes sense, it makes sense, right? Like that's what it comes down to. And like, obviously that's laughable. Like that sounds really funny, but is that bulletproof? Maybe. I just feel like it should be more clear what card text is relevant in more zones. Maybe I'm being a baby. We just need flaps on cards that can cover uncovered card text depending on where the card is. It needs to be that sort of like lithographic foil. So if it's sideways and unrezzed, the text looks different. Where is that? I couldn't find it. I have a habit of being too pedantic about rules, playtesting GMT games. I'll do that. Oh man. Why is that like that? Because it is. Yeah, which is fine. Like we got this far with because it is, but it is a thing that I noticed some cards. I'm like, I honestly don't know how this works intuitively. I agree that R-types interaction are some of the most unintuitive rules gotchas in the game, especially for new players. I mean, that can be summed up in a sentence. Abilities that tell you can advance on axis or steal score, or if the ability can only work from there. Yeah, but it's basically saying the rule is that you have to remember what the exceptions to the rule are. As long as you can say that in a short sentence, I don't think it makes it more elegant, but it's not the best. Yeah, I think the reminder text would be fine. Like just a bracket saying this is active when unrezzed, right? Something like that, maybe. Not the biggest deal, but it is something that I've been seeing, and I know a lot of other people have questions about it as well. I feel like the cards are running into the parts of the rules that are remnants of legacy from FG and the old CCG. I wouldn't say that far. I think it's just NSG, like how much money do you want to bet that there's not going to be an ice in the set that doesn't have additional rules text besides subroutines and strength? I bet a lot of money, and that actually is really interesting, but then of course more edge cases come up they have to work with. Should we redesign the card box to separate which parts of card text is continuous and even if it's unrezzed? Hey, how's it going? I think even just having some sort of flag might be worth something, right? Like the sort of interrupt flag that you see on, I'm going to say Iqua project because we saw it, right? Like just, you need, oh, not Iqua, sorry, Vacheron. Like just some sort of denotation might be worth something. I don't know if you want entirely to redesign the box. Maybe just text that says this is active when unrezzed matters. I think for Maryland, is that written like that? Oh no, the bracket text is considered trashed. Yeah. Yeah, like interface. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Not the biggest deal, but I think it's something for sure. Cool. Well, on that note, you want to dive in through some news? Again, I've said this earlier, it won't be the longest stream today because I still have a lot of video work ahead of me. Our spoilers are tomorrow. Mind you, our spoilers are Jinteki. That's been revealed. I think it's a fun faction because I've made my claims when we did our, like, what are we expecting from the upcoming set. When it comes to Jinteki, I had some pretty strong things to say where, like, I want some fundamental issues to be solved. So tune in to see how those are landed. Just print it on the back. The person is asking where it's in the rules. It's 9.1.8.b. that says specifically that if the card text only makes sense in a certain zone, then it makes sense in that zone. Okay, so Let's go through some rule stuff again. Make sure you go into other places. Apparently what, ShadowNet? It's ShadowNet today, right? Not Slumscast? Slumscast? ShadowNet? Which one is it today? The ringing sound in my head has gone away. Which one is it today? Is it ShadowNet or Slumscast? They're going to be really upset I'm confusing them, and that's why I'm going to continue to do that, because it's funny. Slumscast. Okay, so you can walk away and you can listen to that for sure. It's a podcast. But otherwise, we're going to go through some and react to some spoiler stuff. We're going to keep it pretty light today. We're definitely not playing any Netrunner. It's a weird time to play Netrunner when the new set's out in 3 days. Like, a lot of people don't care. But let's start here at the beginning. I said that the first I think we would probably see is an upcoming runner. I realized in immediate hindsight that was probably the wrong call, because we understood we're getting 2 corp IDs and 1 runner, and it makes more sense for NSG to do corp, runner, corp. Okay, so turns out we started with the Weyland, and very specifically, this is a narrative by Patrick Sklar, friend of the channel, just friend in general. And Patrick said he'd be excited for me to read this on stream, so I'm going to. And I really like this. It's like 4 separate vignettes. Content warning: the story contains implied gun violence, implied kidnapping, and suicidal ideation. Keep that in mind. I'm going to pause for a second. If you do want to pop out for a bit, this will take about 15 minutes to read. Do pop back in after maybe. A lot of people don't care, but we have a CEO this Saturday, so they better start caring. This Saturday? Before the new cards? Last hurrah, Eric. Oh, that's wild. Are you allowed to play spoiled cards? Okay, let's do this. We're going to interrupt this one. Mind you, it's vignette by vignette, because this is full of a bunch of references. And we have a bunch of, references that are worth dissecting, which is really cool, because this is basically 4 different stories attached that explore the world. And I really like it because it explores the characters themselves, and specifically Weyland. There's not too many named characters, and understanding how people work within the system is absolutely fantastic. We're not doing spoiled cards because people voted it down. Bummer. I don't know how a CBI invite works with that format. I think it totally works, Eric, because COs are not competitive events. You actually can do kind of whatever you want. Izzy and I are trying to come down at Neon Static. Oh, super cool. All right. Shout out to Patrick. Let's give this a read. Let me catch my breath. The protester's head was evenly quartered in Angelique's crosshairs. He thought he was being discreet, using the cover of the mob at the gates. However, the SecCam's vise had pinged him from the jump, and of all the possible threats in the crowd, he was the one carrying the heaviest backpack. But Angelique had to wait, all the same. Legally, she couldn't pull the trigger until he'd breached the perimeter or brandished a weapon. She was rooting for a breach. So when he pulled out his powered wire cutter, she felt like she was already winning. Meanwhile, the press conference continued. Luana Campos was the Nuvum spokeswoman du jour. Her voice was mellifluous, soothing, and condescending in exact quantities. Even Jinteki couldn't bottle that. Speakers set up around the fence were carrying Luana's voice past the assembled farmers, construction workers, and press, and out to the protesters, and beyond them, the dusty Amazon plains. And we at Nuvum SA would like to remind our uninvited guests that for every tree we cut down in the rainforest, we are committed to planting 10 in the net. Oh yeah, that'll get them riled up. And the spokeswoman was no slouch in the imagery department. Angelique had seen them set up right at the tree line, Campos standing on a freshly cut stump as wide as she was tall. Her earpiece crackled. Ange, gotta stand down. I know the rules, Rodney. I mean, stand down, stand down. We're done here. Take a half day. We're going to be busy this week. Rod, I'm seeing a break-in in slow motion. This comes from the spire, Ange. Braganza isn't watching, she began, but stopped herself. Sure enough, the guy with the wire cutter had paused his work. Through the scope, she could see his throat moving, sub-vocalizing. He'd just gotten a call. Really cool. So there's a lot of stuff in here. Again, we're going to go story by story. If you're not familiar with Angelique, get familiar with Angelique because she shows up a lot. And not a character I thought we'd see a narrative about, but Angelique Garza Correa, the sniper, the sharpshooter, the protection agent for Weyland, is a really cool character because she's cool when she has a horse. Shoot is also really funny. This is gonna come back because this is kind of nonsense, but this is a really fun kind of joke that we get the reveal from in the story, which is phenomenal. So there's a couple things going on here that are really quite important. Firstly, Luana Campos, whether that character is going to show up as a Weyland executive that works for Nuvum is very interesting. The dusty Amazon plains is really frightening. And I think my favorite part is this line here, because we at Nuvum would like to remind our uninvited guests that for every tree we cut down in the rainforest, we are committed to planting 10 in the net. Uninvited guests, there's that sort of condescension that she loves to get in there. But specifically this, I know Patrick said because he pitched this as flavor text originally on Treeline, and then Treeline got different flavor text. kind of as an homage to that, when I did my spoilers video for tree line, I actually used that very same line, that for every tree we cut down, we print 3, or we plant 3 in cyberspace, is a line that I used in the video that we revealed tree line, because Pat and I were talking about it. I'm like, that's just such a clever line. And specifically, this thing works with 3s in a cool way on a bunch of mediums. And the fact that Patrick inserted that here as a line he wouldn't let go of is really funny. And I like that a heck of a lot. Now, in terms of what's going on here, firstly, the Spire is a name that I think comes up in here, and I think it's my big guess of what the hologram is on the Nuvum art, the being their like castle tower that they're either building or like they're expecting to be there. Mind you, we've seen art kind of like this, I think have we seen it on the, I'm not sure if on one of the art fans, there was like a Weyland building that is like also structurally similar. Yeah, this could be the Spire. Mind you, it ends in an E, but like there's a chance that that sort of tower is that sort of thing. But in terms of what's happening in the story here, obviously somebody's getting a call at the exact same time that they're told to stand down. So it looks like there's some agreement on both sides of the bargaining line, and understanding what that's going to be. I asked Pat about it and he said future story will tell us what that is. I think that's going to be really interesting though, but clearly that 2 teams are working together, and the story of how that's going to happen is going to come up really soon. I think that's really quite cool. I really want to understand what's happening at the end with the sub-vocalizing protester getting a call. Yeah, that's future story. I think we're going to get this week probably. Pat said that's upcoming, which is sick. I assume it's like a thing when you talk over an earpiece without speaking, like the codec from Metal Gear Solid. Yes, or like in Splinter Cell. But basically there's microphones that you can kind of put in your neck that in theory you can kind of talk in your head in the sort of Jason Bourne, Sam Fisher way. And that's exactly what's happening. So sub-vocalizing. The big question to me is who they're talking to, and that's going to come up. I find it funny how we don't get big buildings on Corp IDs this cycle, but those big buildings ended up on agendas instead. Yeah, that's true. I think Nuvum's really weird too, because you don't often see people at that scale on identities, let alone a Weyland identity. Considering the scale of Op was nonsense, the scale of Nuvum's art is like very, very quaint. All right. The APC rumbled through the city. 8 soldiers sat in 12 seats. Ramirez was thinking of who'd fill in the empty spaces when his neighbor nudged him back to the present. So new kid, why the transfer? Ramirez had been dreading this conversation. Best to face it head on. My mom's a police officer in a leg. I didn't want to end up... He shrugged, lifting his gun by the way of finishing the sentence. Hey, I get it, man. I'm in the same boat. Bulldog piped in from across the aisle. Ramirez couldn't remember the man's real name, but his call sign fit his personality pretty well from what he'd seen. Really? Ramirez asked. Yeah, my mom's a biotech vat up in Sansan. Always nagging. I had to move 6,000 miles away just to get some peace and quiet. The rest of the squad laughed like it was a stale joke, which it probably was, until Sergeant Polintra raised a hand. Everyone quieted. Don't let them rag on you, Ramirez. These are strange times. And hey, if things get hot, he said, slamming a magazine into his rifle, the brass will keep an eye out for her. Ramirez swallowed. The APC stilled. Polintra stood up, and the rest of the squad followed suit. All right, let's let the governor know her limo has arrived. All right, short story. APC, for those uninitiated, that's an armored personnel carrier, so those sort of like military trucks that just transport people. In terms of other stuff we're seeing here, I think Allegra, I'm not sure if Allegra has showed up before in Netrunner, but Sansan, biotech definitely has shown up. In fact, an entire cycle or entire set in the cycle was focused on biotech region in Sansan with Jinteki Biotech, which happened in the Sansan cycle. So that's a fun on the nose reference here. There's many kinds of different type of science going on, which is really cute. The one thing that also jumped out to me is the name Polintra, because that actually showed up before on Hannah. Hannah Wheels Polintra. Polintra is a very specific, common name. It's actually a relatively common name, and I asked Pat about it, and he would not confirm whether there's any hard connections, but that is a common name. And we're seeing this sub-theme across not only the narratives, but a lot of the stuff when it comes to, comes down to the cycle, that there's this kind of focus on family and relations. And you see a lot of people whose names exist on both sides of the line. So whether she's a clone, Game of Droids is asking, I doubt it, considering that you'd probably see clone as a subtype, which on most of the clones they are, like Iru has a clone subtype. So I don't think so, but either it's a common name or it's a familial thing. But again, it's cool to see names that you exist on the runner side, on the corp side. And there's kind of this idea here that a lot of these people are admittedly just doing a job as much as the job involves, you know, brandishing weapons towards protesters. So take that as you will. Number 3. Do you think Ken will be okay? As the ambulance hopper ascended, Timo put a reassuring arm around Caroline's shoulders and led her out of the street, out of the riot's fray. They'll take good care of him. The medics know what they're doing. They found a bench and made themselves a hushed bubble from which to watch the scene. Behind them, Timo noticed a bright green spray-painted bird dominating most of a concrete wall. Caroline moved closer. He didn't dare move his arm. In the next second, Timo was on the ground, ears ringing, back stinging. He coughed dust. Caroline was nearby, shakily getting to her feet. He looked around. The building behind them was mostly rubble, suddenly, save for one untouched bit of wall. The piece with the concrete bird. He must have been pretty dizzy, since it seemed like that one standing piece of wall was stretching, growing. Ah, it was falling. Timo threw up his hands and waited to be flattened. Except, in a flash of gleaming metal green, he wasn't. Before him stood an exosuit, a piece of hypermechanized infantry ingenuity wrapped around a brass mill soldier. The suit's visor went transparent, and the grinning man inside spoke through the external amplifiers. "Stay back, folks. You've done your part. Now let me do mine." Caroline made her way to Timo and helped him up. They looked over the suit as it stood there, one massive hand squashing the graffitied bird. The suit was shiny, unmarked. Timo could swear he heard the fuzz of an electrical field sloughing off dust and debris. The forests, green and chrome, seemed to shine under its own spotlight. It had a Nuvum SA logo emblazoned across its broad chest like a football jersey displaying its corporate sponsor. Caroline spoke up. "Thank you for your help. This is going to sound weird, but..." "Oh my god, Caro, is that you?" "Wait, Davy? I knew it. Oh my god, I hadn't seen you since we graduated." She was grinning, exactly like she hadn't been nearly exploded and crushed. "Timo, this is Davy. We went to art school together." "Oh, wow. Small world," Timo choked. Davy, the 10-foot-tall fusion of metal man and art student, slid open his visor. "Caro, this is actually wild. I had no idea you'd be out here." "Oh yeah, it's the right thing to do. Plus my sister-in-law is an Ayase, so..." Caroline, or was it Caro now, was pitching her voice in a way Timo had never heard directed his way before. Hoping to cut into the conversation, he reached his hand out. "Well, it's really great to meet you. Thanks for the, save." Davy looked down at the gesture with confusion. I can't really shake your hand right now." "Right. Yeah, you're busy. Got more walls to hold up." "I mean, I'd crush it." He balled his free fist in demonstration, machinery whirring under the gleaming surface. "Right. Yeah." Timo was relieved when Caroline slipped back in. "I really don't want to keep you, but we should hang out when this is over." "Oh, yeah. Maybe the Sasi Sashimi by the university. The one where we, When Caroline slapped Davy's alloyed bicep, cackling, Timo stared longingly at the concrete slab. He wanted so badly to be under it. Really funny. Pat's story is always ending in a sad punchline is pretty funny, which is great. Hush bubble. This starts really dark, actually, in a way that's a self-reference to one of Pat's other stories, which is, do you think Ken will be okay, as Ken is returned to the ambulance by a hopper. And Patrick's last story talked about Atea dressing up as medical professionals and rescuing away clones. And mind you, Ken is the name of one of the biggest clones in Netrunner. If you played one of the only clone runners, actually there's like 2 or 3 now, right? And understanding that he's been taken away by the medical hopper has really dark subtext when Atea is disguising themselves as medical people to kidnap clones. So it's cool that it starts like that, but it's amazingly dark in terms of like, what is it called? I guess readers irony, dramatic irony, which is great. Otherwise, the story here, it basically shows off the art and the scene, and the fact that I'm not sure if the story was written before the art was commissioned from this, and this is easily one of my favorite arts in the set so far, which is, again, Mauricio Herrera just absolutely killing it with Hearts and Minds, where you see this sort of like, firstly, in terms of the theme itself, you know, you got to capture their hearts and minds, and you get this like Captain America-esque super soldier just effortlessly in gleaming, pristine armor, keeping people alive that are going to be crushed while they stand haplessly there. Obviously, the jealousy and the couple now kind of getting back together and Timo being very upset about the whole thing is just the cherry on top of the hearts and minds being captured on both sides in different ways is really, really fun. But it's a really, really good story. Good voices. Do you practice? No, but thank you, Gelhard. That's very kind. Really like this. I think it's a really cool way to bring this, and like it's not very often that we see an art, and now I can depict this story on it relatively well. And anytime I see this, I'll see the story, which is great. We got a second mech suit, thumbs up on another card. How many do you think will be in the whole set? Maybe more than one, which is absolutely fantastic. I think we've seen a couple more mech suits. I swear I've seen those 2 on the left before. I think this guy with this haircut, I think we might have seen before. Again, Mauricio did B1001, another fantastic Oh, no, it's a different haircut by a mile, but that's sort of like feathered haircut with the color. I think we might have seen in someone before. This weird domed head is like very, very strange. And I think I would remember seeing something like that because that's a really strange design. And specifically Mauricio Herrera's art of giving like motion to smoke and getting that clean, like cartoony smoke and this clean fire. Oh, I love it so much. We back in the day used a lot of these sort of like, I'm not sure how to call it, but like very bold cartoon effects for fire and smoke and stuff like that. I just really like it. There's a lot of motion in this piece. The really like, I would say mildly jingoistic, like, you know, join the army thumbs up is fantastic. I legit couldn't follow the story when I read them last time, but I understood where Pat was going with it. I like these. I think these turned out really good. All right. Now let me do mine. Number 4, back to Angelique, right? Angelique was wishing she'd brought Shoot along. A dirt road, wild scrub, and mechanized agriculture as far as the eyes could see. This was the horse. This is what horses were made for. At least it was what Shoot was made for, engineered stallion that he was. But when she left the ranch that morning, she thought she'd be on site for 12 hours. Not fair to leave him tied up for so long. So, in her best approximation of riding horseback, she kept her hopper low and slow over the dusty road back to town. That's how she spotted the kid. The magnified view at the bottom corner of her screen showed him trudging along the roadside, shoulders hunched, an unwieldy placard over his shoulder. She read the sign as she passed. The apex predator of the Amazon is the chainsaw. Frankly, it was a little too wordy to fit comfortably on a card, but she appreciated the metaphor. She studied his face in the rear view. Young, probably a student. He had a nasty-looking black eye, smudged blood under his nose. She remembered the scuffle while she was packing her things. Someone didn't like being told to go home. Yeah, all right, she muttered to no one. If Shoot were here, she wouldn't be picking up hitchers. She stopped the hopper and popped the passenger side door as he caught up. He looked even more pathetic up close. Hey, need a lift? He nodded and stepped forward, then paused for a second. She thought he was working out how to fit the sign into the hopper, but instead he hefted over one shoulder and hurled it away. It made half a revolution, wobbled, and landed face down in the dirt. Man, I think Pat's stories that end in these like sort of kind of funny punchlines are really great. The fact that it's, you know, somebody clearly who's been messed up by a Weyland operative who at the end of the day, like obviously isn't opposed to what this person is doing, but it's her job to maybe punch this guy in the face, which is, you know, Weyland stuff. And at the end of the home, they both agree on a ride home because things seem fruitless. And at the end of the day, they're smaller than all of this is kind of messed up, obviously. The fact that the sign made half a revolution, I think is just really funny when it comes to protest. And then we've given up halfway because it seems useless. And then obviously it's littering on top of all of it as much as it is now the Amazon plains. Very funny too. The horse is named Shoot, which is obviously kind of goofy because now shoot the horse is a sentence I have to say more than once. But now Angelique's flavor text, which was a bit silly, just shoot, is not obvious whether she's trying to fire or just yell at her horse, at her engineered stallion, which we need more horse characters in Netrunner, that's for sure. Really quite like this, that it humanizes Angelique, who is, you know, the hitman character, not exactly a hitman, like the, you know, marksman character is kind of quite fun. And that gives us a look into what Nuvum is doing, as much as we actually don't get a good look into what Nuvum is doing or why they're doing what they're doing. Which again, I do think future card text, future flavor is going to spoil a bit more. But now we have what Nuvum SA is and 2 other cards, and I don't have a great understanding of what they are doing, just that they're here and they're building and they're doing Weyland in the most Weyland way possible. I think that's cool. So let's talk about the ID. Again, shout out to Patrick for that story. There's a bunch of other stories. There's one I haven't read yet, the one from Calvin Wong. I've been a bit underwater. That's the HB one, but I'm excited for that. Calvin Wong does good writing as well. Hey, Bjorn, hello, Western Netrunner's a vibe. Didn't know I wanted. Yeah, right? It's just horses and guns and hats and some poker in the meantime. So Nuvum SA, Law of the Land. Again, a very Western title. 50 minimum deck size. The thing about Wheels is that she's anime. Simp for Calvin's writing, not gonna lie. Yeah, Calvin did the last Mercury piece, right? And I don't know if Mercury shows up in the HB piece, but Mercury is really tied into HB in general, so I'm gonna check it for sure. Poker, Bolatro. So 50-15, mind you, 50, we'll come back to that. I think 50 is hella cursed, but probably doesn't play out to be as cursed as I think it might be. Whenever you finish resolving an operation or an action on an expendable card, look at the top card of R&D. You may trash that card. Before going further, the first time I bounced off of this, or I read this when I finished reading this, I thought it was resolving an operation or an action on an expendable card. From my understanding, those are two separate things. It's whenever you finish resolving an operation or an action on an expendable card. My first read got to when you resolve an operation or action, both on either or, but has to be on an expendable card. We can all confirm it doesn't work that way, right? Like this just works on operations. Am I the only one who messed that up? I'll die laughing. The horse character turns out to be a robotic cybernetic horse like the old Brave Star cartoon. They also did the Parma's fiction too, and Thule. Oh, cool. If I recall correctly, there are no expendable operations. Yeah, that would make sense. Expendable operations are actually kind of cool as much as they're modal, but yeah, you're right. There are no expendable operations. I messed it up 100%. Yeah, it makes sense in context, but it is something that I think a lot of people can trip over. Yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, but it's resolving an operation, comma, or an action on an expendable card. I wonder if a comma there helps. Look at the top card of R&D. You may trash that card. So firstly, getting information on the top of the deck is definitely worth something. Whether you want to trash it just because you want to get deeper through your deck is something a lot of Netrunner players don't exactly do all the time, right? Like, but hitting a bacterial and like just trashing 6 cards that you don't want to draw is technically really good, as much as people don't do that as all the time because you might as well draw them, I guess. But like just trashing bad cards from the top of your deck to draw into your better cards is something that's worth doing and functionally allows you to play with the deck with a smaller deck size, which is actually really important because we're playing probably 54. Now, the first time you trash a card from R&D during each of your turns, gain 2 credits. So the top is whenever, but the bottom payoff is only once per turn. The flavor text says our fist shall hold the world. And funny enough, I think both the IDs have flavor text to do with fists and hands. I'll be honest, this flavor text is just so absurdly over the top in the way that it bends back to being pretty funny. I thought it was kind of a nonsense flavor text because it's like just so goofy that it actually kind of becomes cool at the end, which is kind of neat. So we said this before in the stream, but we did not reveal any other expendable cards in this set. We saw 2 other cards, or in this article, mind you. I think that's really strange. I'd argue that these articles haven't been doing a great job in making me excited to play the IDs they show off because, very specifically in this case, this one's worse than Sebastião. These cards, while you could play in a Nuvum deck, they don't make me excited to play Nuvum. And while I'd argue that Nuvum's text is like interesting enough that I don't think you need to imagine more cards to think like, oh, this could be cool. I just wish there was at least one card here that was expendable or made sense with archives. And we haven't seen them, which maybe that's a good way to get you to plug in to care about content creators putting out spoilers, which I think you would anyways. I just find that very strange. Yo, Step Tabby, how's it going? It's so quintessentially Weyland. It's so goofy though. It's like so silly. Our fist shall hold the world. Like you can't say that in a straight face without somebody be like, what? What are you saying? That's ridiculous. First read it, yes, messed it up, and that's a big reason I read new cards 3 times. Yeah, Thanos. I think it's a good thing to do anyways. Hey, Tron, how's it going? Tron, we got to talk about the last, what's it called you're on, because a criminal card came up and your response was, it's really hard to be on a stream and be like, I don't think this is it. And then everyone's like, no, come on. It's a bang on for a pompous private military contractor motto. It is, but it is a bit much. Like, I think that's a cool thing about Weyland is like they can say the silly quiet thing really loudly because they're Weyland and they don't give a shit. But like if a military contractor said this, they would look like absolute dickheads more than they would normally being military contractors, maybe. But like it is just so absurd. It's like 80s villain stuff. Descent is literally a card you were saying you wished we had seen. Expendable archives. Yes. Descent is a very good card for this, but it wasn't revealed in this, right? Other than Nubans like Weyland's in-house coup d'etat division, when a government won't cooperate, send Nuvum in, I can't tell if that's what they're doing. I don't know if there's something to the name that makes it obvious, but I still cannot tell what Nuvum is doing, besides the fact that they care about like political public, perception, which they should. Obviously, they've cleared the Amazon for building stuff. But from what I've seen from Weyland spoilers so far, I don't have a good idea of what Nuvum is doing besides like just generic ghoulish Weyland stuff, which is fine. Like this shock trooper is pretty intimidating. That's pretty cool. But I just can't figure out what they're doing exactly. How was your scoop season? Excited for the new Anarch package? Hype? Yeah, cool. I'm excited for a lot of stuff. We're going to go through the articles one by one. Saving the quiet part out loud since 22XX. Yeah. So, okay, firstly, what I was really worried about this card, and I think the way it's going to play out is actually drastically different, is 50 deck size we haven't seen as a minimum for corporations. So again, for the uninitiated, you have to play a certain amount of agendas based off your deck size. So classically, most corporations are 45, so they generally play 49 cards, so they can play as few agendas as possible in the most amount of cards before they hit 50. Because every breakpoint for how many agendas is on every divide by 5. So from 50 to 54, you have to play 22 to 23 agenda points. Now, very interestingly, if you want to go and play play 55 to 59, you have to play 24 to 25 agenda points, which is actually a very notable break point. And this scares me in some ways because I think actually making corporations play bigger deck sizes is one of the things that I find very draining when I queue up on like JNet Casual. Because very often we'll play against players that either are trying something out or they're newer players and maybe they just don't value a thinner deck. And because you end up playing a deck that is like inherently 60 cards, their win conditions don't show up very quickly, but also the agendas don't show up that quickly. And there's a lot of variance sometimes that some games can drag on because they're not very good at closing the game out and their agendas can be hard to find. And mind you, I should plug this video in more, but we have some really good numbers to prove this. We did an agenda math video, mind you, called All the Agenda Math. Don't watch the advertisement. Unless, yeah, actually watch the ad. And we basically went through and we did some math to talk about this sort of idea of what the agenda density is for certain decks and certain deck size. And we've actually calculated this. If you go to standard and you play a 54 card agenda deck, and mind you, if you want to understand the entire terminology of this video, you should just watch the video because there's a lot of assumptions made here. But in short, this number here of number of accesses is the number of random accesses a runner has to make off central servers to have at least a 50% chance to win the game on centrals. And as soon as you get to 54, the number, if you want to play as many 3-pointers as you want to, it's not very good for the runner. So the smallest agendas you can play is 7 3-pointers and 1 2-pointer, and then you hit 18 accesses. 18 accesses is pretty average, but most importantly, now agendas are 1 in every 6.75 cards. The bigger this number is, I think the less interesting Netrunner is as a whole, because on average, every single central access is like, it's weird to quantify these numbers because while you still need about the same amount of accesses, having a big number here is just kind of draining to play because you just need more and more accesses and allows the corporation to play like a Glacier Dirtle game where they can just ice up everything. But the big jumping point here is not 54, it's 59. And because when you play 59 cards, you have to play 24 to 25 agendas. And very notably, anytime in Netrunner where you're allowed to play an agenda density that's dividable, or sorry, an agenda amount that's clearly divisible by 3, you get really cursed numbers. So if you played a standard 44 deck, 44 has to play 18 or 19 agenda points, you run into those like Asmari decks that are playing 6 agendas. With the 6 agendas, you need 19 accesses to hit 50%, and there's one agenda put 7.33 cards. That's almost the best in the standard format right now, and that is nightmarish. That is one agenda and 7.33 cards, and you have to steal half the agendas in their deck to win the game. But this actually gets worse in some ways when you play 59 cards, because if you want to play a 59 card deck, you're playing 24 agendas, that's divisible by 3. If you're playing 8 agendas, it's 19 and 7.38. That is the worst possible number in Netrunner possibly right now. And I'd argue that this doesn't show the whole picture because I think a big thing when you're playing Nuvum is that you're going to be grinding through your deck. So functionally, while it is a 54 or 59 card deck, the way that's going to grind itself out, the density on R&D is going to get higher, kind of like playing around Op, where they're going to shrink their deck that fundamentally they're going to be playing a much smaller deck than you think. So I don't think we exactly have to be worried about it, but in some ways I am genuinely worried about this because those are some kind of messed up numbers. And I think inherently one of the best things you can do with Nuvum is probably just play a bunch of 3-pointers. Because inherently getting a lot of money, getting things in your bin, having the runner be scared about it, kind of incentivizes you to play punitive Counter-Strike. I don't see a really strong win condition attached to this identity besides slow Glacier Dirtle. I don't know if Rush is going to make more sense in this. We have to see more card support, whether Rush makes more sense in this than any of the other Weylands right now. But the one thing that makes real good sense with this, with big money, blasé, trashing things into archives, is playing as few agendas as possible, because then the Nuvum ability is as safe as possible, and then just playing as few 3-pointers and building some sort of nightmare where it's, again, like 8 agendas and 59 cards, which is pretty hard to deal with. What's the breakdown to have 24 points in deck? 55, 29? Yes, 55 to 29 is 24. Because it's 20 to 21 on 45 to 49. Then on 50 to 54, it's just up by 1. So 22 to 23. So 24 is 55 to 59. High agenda points and sparse agendas increase the variance? Yes, and you have really high variance games. So this is the sort of thing that I think you really need to see in paper, but abstractly seeing a 50 card deck that inherently probably wants to play 3-pointers unless we see another win condition, and then either can play Hyper Glacier, kind of like, you know, Sokka's Worlds list, maybe that's not as good as Built to Last, or Punitive You, is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare, and it, in some ways highly disincentivizes single accesses and the fun interactive part of Netrunner. I'm really scared about this. Nuvum's own ability helps to manage the variance. It definitely does. But I think, again, if Nuvum's ability is relevant, you probably want to be trashing more often than not. That will shrink the deck, that's for sure. But it also incentivizes you not to play a lot of agendas, I don't think. Unless we see something that actually makes sense. But that's the problem, is we haven't seen any cards that work with Nuvum so far. Why is the spoiler season like this? But default operations, Nuvum does feel like an Asmari and Weyland. Yes. And exactly, maybe that's a reason that you're going to get back to that sort of hyper glacier where there's very few agendas in the deck and you're playing into Ismari. So it's strange. I think it's cool that Nuvum's flexible. I think it's cool that it's hard to get a read on Nuvum. I think Nuvum's not going to play out in the way that I fear with big agenda, big points, play slow, grind them out. I think it's probably not going to because this ability really incentivizes you. I think also look at the top of R&D and not trash. It's like a really weird space because ideally if it's an agenda, you probably should trash it anyways because if it's not an agenda, the runner understands the top of R&D is valuable. Do they run it? Do they not run it? But ideally you're firing this ability once per turn to gain 2 credits every turn, and that's kind of buck wild. Like that is generally pretty buck wild. The question is, do you play as few agendas and like attitude adjustment? And you know, we saw, mind you, a new Weyland. That's another big thing is we saw a Weyland card that is basically a spin doctor type effect for only agendas. And that might just encourage you even more to play as few agendas and just keep getting them into R&D and building a late game board state. I don't know. I think we just saw agenda recursion cards, which I think you kind of need a Nuvum, but like recurring agendas over and over again from archives back into the deck doesn't seem really fun to me. In one of Patrick Story's vignettes, a Weyland goon was being deployed, so they didn't fight a relative in the cops. I don't think we know whether the cops joined the rebellion or not. So they didn't fight a relative in the cops. I'm not sure if I follow that, Dave. What do you mean? Look at a snare on top of R&D, pause for dramatic effect, stays, wait for the runner to run profit. Yeah, Lockmanos. It is really cool. Like that sort of mind game of like getting information and using it in a weird way is actually really fun. I think that is easy to undervalue how that's going to be interesting during a game. With the new HB double, you can even recur cards back to hand. Yeah, that card's only 2 influence too, and it's even more tempo positive in Nuvum. Every operation and every archives retrieval already interacts with Nuvum. Does it need more help? I'd argue that it does. Because the fact that your ability is only quote unquote safe if you have a spin doctor on the table limits how quickly you want to use this ability. But I'd argue that obviously we've seen other support cards like Armed Acid Protection. And very notably, this card doesn't work with Armed Acid Protection the way that we expected it to do. Because when you trash a card from R&D, it's face down. So if you want Armed Acid Protection to be as good as possible, as quickly as possible, this is not the easiest ID for that to happen on the basis that, right, like you trash your cards face down, if I'm not mistaken. On that note too, if you want to play as many expendable cards, then I'd argue you could get away with not playing expendable cards. Just playing enough operations might be okay. But when it comes to things like Slash and Burn Agriculture, this doesn't make that much sense in 5/3s all the time, specifically if you're playing a punitive deck because you really don't want to play non-5/3 agendas. So there's already some tension here. So I think Slash and Burn kind of incentivizes you to get like, this is a good card in Nuvum when you actually make money playing it for sure. Like that's really cool. But now there's a lot of tension on whether you want to play a lot of big agendas and play punitive as a kill combination, or whether this is actually an interesting rush deck compared to all the other interesting Weyland rush decks right now. And that's a hard thing to beat. Mind you, we talk about what is like the best thing to do, but sometimes just a new interesting thing to do is good enough. But we already have Outfit as a rush deck. We already have Op as many rush decks. So what is Nuvum doing that they're not doing? And that's probably going to be big agendas. I'll be honest. I don't know what to think about it. It's really, really hard. I've been scrubbing through the stream to find the narrative talk and chuckling. I think, Morgan, how's it going? I think you're dropping the part that's going to make the vignette 1 on this make sense. I think that's what I've heard. So I know you have a story somewhere in the docket. Veronica, how are you enjoying scoop season? I'm enjoying scoop season a lot. Our scoops go up tomorrow, and it's not going to be the longest stream because they're not finished. And I've been spending a lot of time working on it as opposed to like joining streams. So that's a bit of a bummer. So mixed bag. It's been really fun. Seeing new cards is fun. I just want to get my scoops out so I can enjoy scoop season as opposed to being stressed about it, which is my only problem. Don't worry, there's a new win condition for the runner not spoiled yet. I worry about that more. I honestly really worry about new win conditions. I don't like when alternate win conditions in Netrunner because it's very hard. Okay, they could be cool, but it's very hard to make a win condition that is more interesting than the base rule set of Netrunner. And that is just a testament to how good the base set of rule set of Netrunner is good. Like, I think people forget how good the base set of Netrunner is, and then they want an alternate win condition, right? Like, it's hard. You've been playing 54 and that's fun? Yeah, maybe. Need reverse Kakarenbo, yeah, for real. Is it possible also the power curve of new IDs since last year has been reduced? I'm thinking of IDs like Thule, Epiphany, and Mercury. I don't think the power curve is going to be reduced because there's still really good IDs. I think Epiphany is going to be good with the new set. It just didn't get support cards for some reason. And admittedly, NBN was in a good, reasonable spot. I think Mercury maybe is going to be competitive. I don't know. I'm glad Mercury isn't. I think Thule is okay too. It's just an economy issue. So I don't think so. But the problem is like you're following up Op, which was also released last year. And if you're like, you know, disfavorably comparable to Op, that's a really hard spot to be in, right? Like Op is the coolest thing ever. And like, obviously any set's going to make Op more interesting because there's going to be more cards. So I don't know. I'm sort of worried whether low agenda points agendas will be playable in a meta with Hermes. I think they are. In some ways, it's better. Like, you're right. Install advancing of 5-3 is scary into Hermes, but the fact that you just have less agendas in your deck and you can control where they are because you know they're in archives, you can put them into the deck. So there's two things they have to run. Let's say that makes big agendas also better. It's actually harder to run a deck that runs a lot of small agendas in some ways. I have several pieces yet to drop. A couple got delayed due to bit emergency last Friday. Oh, I hope everything's okay, Morgan. Threat 7 win the game. Dad Mash. We saw a lot of good Mad Dash cards, mind you, in spoiler seasons. It hasn't been coming up a lot, but we've seen a bunch of cards that make Mad Dash a lot more playable, which matters a fair bit for a deck that's going to be like cheesy all 5-3s. And Weyland has 5-3s, mind you. Okay, Hearts and Minds, again, so far one of my favorite pieces of art. Oh man, Marisha does good stuff. We talked about the story of this. I love the story. Asset Political. Mind you, Political is a really weird subtype because classically some of the most powerful cards have been political and they've been banned out. But political cards are inherently cards that you don't want to ice up. And the value of not icing up a card, and mind you, 1-2 res to trash cost, we've been seeing on more cards than any set ever. Feels like NSG is just stamping 1-2 on so many cards right now. Maybe that's a good thing because it's easy to understand a lot of cards have the same trash to res cost. That's not the worst res to trash cost for a corporation, but 1-2 means that this card has to protect itself in some way outside of the fact that 2 trash cost isn't a lot. Like 2 trash costs is not a lot. Some decks can trash that without considering it and feel good about it. 3, you start to consider about it. 4, obviously it's a bit messed up. But the fact that this is political, you probably want to have this uniced, and making this uniced and having it be a thing the runner doesn't want to trash is really hard, especially in Weyland. There's a couple punishment cards, but like it's really tricky. Let's talk about the card does. Political made a lot of sense for the cycle theme wise. Yes, 100% I believe that. And I really like the theme of this card. I just think mechanically political cards, especially in a world without hard-hitting news and massive amounts of recursion, are going to be very different than when political cards were one of the most banned subtypes in all of Netrunner. Do you want more asset spam? Wanting higher trash costs get you more asset spam? No, I agree. I totally agree. But having like a reasonable trash cost is what you want. We'll see if 2 is too low. It's probably not too high. But at the end of the day, like this is something you can manageably trash if it's political. And I don't know if there's enough punishment to punish you for doing this. So it's about timing and like misdirection and putting out more things, right? Like I think that's where Hearts and Minds is really weird, is that it's probably only consistent if you can put out too many things that the runner doesn't have time to deal with this. And at that point, we're doing asset spam anyways, right? Why the transfer? My mom's a police officer in Allegra. I don't want to end up lifting his gun, by the way. I finished. Oh, you mean they're running away so you think that... That's an interesting read of that I didn't consider. That's interesting, Dave. Yeah, I wonder what that means. I think it's a Probdivos card, so it's defended by Oppo on top. Okay, let's read what the card does. I think that's a good way of looking through it. Mad Dash Freedom through Equality Notoriety solved the 5-3 deck problem but failed. Mad Dash did solve the 5-3 deck problem for a long time. Same with Freedom. Freedom, mind you, and Notoriety don't exist anymore. But Mad Dash was a really big reason that was challenging some of the 5-3 decks back in the day. In fact, we have a whole column here called Mad Dash Ability, and you'll notice specifically when it comes to Mad Dash being playable, like we talked about this deck that's playing 8 5-3s and 59 cards, which is cursed as heck, 19 7.38. It goes down to 12 accesses. Dash Ability 7. So these sort of decks that are only running 5-3s are some of the decks that are hit the hardest by playing Mad Dash consistently. That's actually a really, really big deal. Is that anytime you get a lot of decks, right? Like look at the really bad standard 44 that's playing 6 agendas. It goes from 19 accesses to 12. And the fact that this box is pure white means that this deck has the worst dash ability. So if this is a common thing, you're running to Asmari, playing the Mad Dash drops the amount of accesses you need to win the game on average by 7. It's one of the best cards you can play in the matchup. So keep that in mind that, yes, Mad Dash is really good, as much as I'm not convinced that Nuvum is just going to be a 5-3 thing. As cursed as I'm really excited to play 59 card Nuvum, it sounds a bit cursed. I do think the problem with Asmari Glacier are cards like Echo Chamber where you can cheat the last point to avoid having to actually score 3 5-3s. Arguably, but I just don't think, like I've said this before, I wish it was a rule of Netrunner that you cannot play more than 3 5-3s in your deck. I don't know. I think the game is more interesting. And this is something that you mostly saw in Startup, is that like in a format where there's not a lot of 5-3s, on average, every single access is a bit more exciting. And you're not playing a lot of grindy attritional decks. But that being said, there's a lot of people that enjoy Glacier and like keep away games like that. But for what it's worth, most of the most toxic decks in the history of Netrunner that have been banned out are decks that like have a really strong alternate win condition. And they're just running as few 5-3s as possible just to save on agenda slots and to like have defensive abilities, right? Like that is inherently a thing where they just try and hide the agendas. And I like Netrunner a bit better where the agendas are an important part of the corporation's win condition, not just a weight that they're trying to constantly bury. Because then we end in a situation where just recursion and bin management is more important. All right, sorry, we have to read this. When your turn begins, you may move one advancement counter from an installed card to an installed card you can advance. If this server is not protected by ice, so that's what the political clause is attached to, you may also place an advancement counter on an installed card you can advance. So it gets you a clickless advancement counter. That's pretty good if it's uniced, obviously, and it allows you to move advancement counters, which is of dubious value, as much as if all of the stars align, this is a 2-cost easy trashable that's on the table that the runner doesn't trash while you have something in a remote server. You technically can get 2 advancements for free as long as one card has already been advanced, which means you can never advance 5 threes. For that to line, that's pretty difficult. There was an NBN card that did this back in the day. Franchise City, or is it the other one? No, it's the other one. Crap. What's the other Universe of Tomorrow NBN card? Whoa, it's from that area. Early Premiere, thank you. That's the one. Right? We had a card like this. And admittedly, it's less flexible. And back in the day, there was different things, but Early Premiere was a very similar card. When your turn begins, you may pay a credit to place one advancement counter on a card you can advance in the root of a server. This card saw no play. That's not the most damning of testimonies, but like we've seen something very similar to this, and this had very little to no impact on the meta. This is something that is relatively similar to that. Moving around advancements is a weird thing. I think you can technically get some value with that in a deck like Built to Last, where you advance something and just move it to something where you want to stack, advance it to gain 2 credits and do that. I think that's a bit convoluted, but I don't know. I don't know how you get this on the table in a deck in which trashing this is a problem that is actually going to fire consistently. It seems really, really difficult, and I don't think the top text, if you ice this up, is worth a deck slot. There's always a loophole. Can't play more than 3/5 no problem. I'll just play 3 vulnerability audits. Yo, Ba, how's it going? Congratulations on the stream yesterday. There's some really, really cool cards there. Hermes' popularity has gone down a lot since TI, though. Leela existed during a time where 4-2s and 3-2s was still played. I think there's a lot of 5-3s since they have been strong. I think so, Morgan, but I don't think it's a good idea to play a deck with a lot of 1-pointers. Right? Like, I think Sports Metal is in a really bad spot, like classic Sports Metal, because of Hermes. I think there's a lot of decks, like there's a lot of NBN archetypes that are not being explored with a lot of 1-pointers just because Hermes exists. Like, it's really hard to play 1-pointers into Hermes. There are a lot of FFG 5-3s that will rotate in the future, just throwing it out there. Yeah, I'm excited for a world without 5-3s. And I think adding that 5-3 banning rule is like not very elegant, but I do like it in a meta where every faction has very limited access to 5-3s. It does let you never advance a 5-3. It does, as long as you move 1 counter and then you can place 1 counter. So if it is really difficult to make this lineup. I think the amount of hoops that you have to go through for this not to be trashed, for a board state for it to matter, is very, very, very difficult. If you're getting a value proposition card to move around advancements in a remote server, right, I think you can just play wall to wall. Mind you, all this stuff gets challenged in startup where you have a smaller card pool, but wall to wall is just really good. If you need a value option for an advanceable ice deck, like you can just get advancements. Why move advancements? I don't know. This one seems really tricky. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it because it's a puzzle, but I think overall, the trash cost and it not protecting itself that well in Weyland, and then this not being relevant on too many board states is really quite tricky. And at the end of the day, if a wall-to-wall can do what most of this does on most board states, I'd probably play wall-to-wall over this. I noticed that me having scoops was enough to finally get you to subscribe. Yo, Ba, for real? I was like noticing that. I'm like, oh man, I'm not subscribed. This is really awkward because I'm subscribed to you on this, and then generally I don't get the notifications all the time, but I still watch your stuff. And because I searched it and I realized I wasn't subscribed, and I was like so nervous about it because I'm like, Ba's gonna notice I'm not subscribed, and it felt really bad. But I'm subscribed on here. It's just like I watch mostly on my phone, and it's been a mess. I'm glad I'm subscribed. Is this secretly a decky card for PE? I don't think so. I don't think so. Because that's 3 influence. And 3 influence in a PE trap deck is a lot of influence. You can spend that on Seamless Launch. You can spend that on, like, Seamless Launch is so good in trap PE and it's more consistent, let alone you can Trick of Light and just advance things its own. Right? Like, specifically in Jiteki, you have Trick of Light. And the idea is that if you're repurposing advancement counters, why not just play the card that's harder for them to interact with? It gives you the same amount of click compression, largely. And that's a lot of influence and another weak trashable to get wrecked from centrals, which is a good way to track PE. This card, I don't really see a good use cost, but 3 influence is a lot. That's a lot. So the case for this to matter is like you have a lot of things on the table, like never advancing false leads to do something cool on the same click or get an Alice counter, but getting this in a situation where everything lines up and then this is not contested by the runner is a very difficult slots proposition. I think there's some amount of support to make this make sense, but I can't find a use case for this. Even in Pravdivos, there's way better cards for Pravdivos on 3 influence, including this one. This is a really good Pravdivos card. I wasn't sold on this card. I'm more sold on it the more I think about it, but this one's also really weird. We'll get to it in a second. Prep a clearinghouse, the same thing. It's like you could seamless. There's trickle light if you really want to. You can prep a clearinghouse, but getting a board state in which you have a clearinghouse where another counter really quite matters, and this is on the table, and they're not trashing this. It's like you want your cards, and admittedly, this is like competitive Netrunner minded, and so obviously casual Netrunner, anything works, and that's one of the coolest things about Netrunner is that having a board state where this is consistently a draw that you're excited about is incredibly difficult. Maybe an op, you can trash a 2-coster to get this on certain board states. Like you can trash a Cyber Sand and then like last click before the runner ends their turn. And then you get this on the table to get an advancement on your card. And even that is probably not as consistent as like obviously pulling that NBN card, that fast advance, or a Bast Chiraboga or anything like that. That's better on more board states and probably costs less influence. Oh, actually it's in faction. So you know what I mean? It's really hard to find a board state where this is worth something. I feel like a hostile architecture slot is an option. Yes. And those are the sort of cards that I think this needs to lay on, which are cards that inherently protect your other political cards to make the trash cost of this good. But if you look at like the sort of grudge work decks, the slots in that deck are actually pretty tight. And all those cards are much better on almost every board state. And getting the advancements on your ice doesn't really matter in that matchup. Mind you, that deck is going to change somewhat fundamentally because Formicary got banned out. We haven't got to that yet. But yeah, I'm not even convinced in those decks it's better than like Rococo, which is like totally fine. And notably, this only can interact with advanceable cards, so you can't do some cool stuff like advance the reconstruction contracts. The cycle's so big for us not going with some common naming schemes in exchange for more narrative focused ones. Lol, there's an HP clearance type card that got previewed today. Too? Yeah, on the process. I feel like the naming of cards like Hearts and Minds is sick. This doesn't sound like an asset. I love the name of this. I think Morgan, I have some criticisms, especially because of one of the cool criminal cards that Boss showed off on Monday. It was like such an easy home run for making criminal feel like criminal again, and instead it gets like a very, you know, high-minded, functional name that feels more like a Shaper card when I just wanted a ransomware attack. And I feel like that one is a bit too clever for me. But this is a really, really cool name for a card. There's no way around it. How much influence is the NBN political fundraiser? Federal, it's 2. And like Federal makes sense because even if you ice up Federal, the ability is good enough. That is a reasonable ability if you ice it up, and 2-cost trashable is very relevant because not only is Oppo in every NBN deck largely, in Epiphany, trashing this comes with a real cost. That's a really big difference between politicals outside of Weyland faction is that you can honestly punish them in very reasonable ways. And sure, you can wake up call people if they trash this in Weyland, but again, there's just better cards to get on tables for more board states. This one seems really difficult to be really excited about, but it's cool. Cupulation is spot on for Mercury's theme. Okay, again, maybe that one's going over my head. It's a cool card. It's a very interesting card, but like maybe getting a bit more direct with it being a ransomware attack and it's making me feel like a criminal is kind of what I want in my criminal cards. I think it's a really cool theme about like, you know, extracting, you know, the right alloys and making something into something more valuable. Yeah, that's cool. But like, oh man, I just want a criminal card that's just like rob someone. So maybe that's me. Wake Up Call seems like a good value in multi-meta. It really is. I just don't think you need to play Hearts and Minds to make Wake Up Call good. Mercury is secretly Anarch. All right. Now this card is weird because my value on this has changed a fair bit. I think a lot of time is spent talking about the art too, and the art is pretty sick. In fact, who was on at one of the daily casts to talk about the art brief itself? But the focus of the canted angle is like such a wild choice. This sort of like horizontal thing, or slightly, you know, Dutch angle. Well, the fact that this is fundamentally in a building, which is a weird thing, kind of makes me feel like I'm unfortunately hiding in this bush watching these bad things happen or the cleanup to the bad things. But whoever decided the Dutch angle on this, which is probably Oliver, I don't know if the Dutch angle was in the script, is like such a cool part to make this card really jump out. You just have to wait and see. Yeah, I believe it. Mercury's secretly an Anarch. AD, Mercury's secretly a Shaver. Anyways, it's a modal card. It's Grey Ops, Call of Duty. Costs nothing. It's 1 influence, so you can consider this anywhere. And it has 2 costs, 2 abilities, and during modal, you can do both abilities. Or sorry, during threat 3, you can do both modal abilities. The first is place 1 advancement counters on each of up to 2 installed cards you can advance. This is the exact card we've seen before, but is it cheaper now? Oh, that's not right. Oh, it is. Oh, same cost. This is the card that exists in the Weyland card pool from the original FFG core set in 2012. It's a really old card. And within Weyland, it was unplayable. It's really just bad. That's not worth enough for a card slot. Obviously getting 2 advancements for 0, take that seamless launch. But it's 2 cards. So finding board states where this is a good enough card in your hand is very, very low. But that being said, this was a busted card, but in HP combo decks. because in HP combo decks, especially with Cerebral Imaging and Identity that gave you, again, functionally infinite hand size, you could do combos where spending one operation to advance 2 separate cards leads to kill combos or fast advance combos. So this card existing is really important, and spending 1 influence, having a slightly more flexible card in Eternal, whatever. It's probably going to be hard to make this card do something in Standard, specifically with combo decks, because I don't know if HB combo decks can really do much with this, but it's something to definitely keep in mind that for combo brewers, this is obviously something. The angle was done during templating. What? So the art is actually flattened and then y'all just like tilted it for fun? That's really funny. That's kind of cool. Very excited to play 6x Shipment to Kaguya, my Eternal CI. Exactly, yeah. I'm a bit behind, but I have to agree. Hearts and Minds is one of my favorite card names ever. Yo, Seb, how's it going? It's really, really good. Now, remove all virus counters from one installed card. I think right now in Netrunner, with the existence of virus-based Anarch decks, purging is in a really weird spot. I think it's really hard to purge. I honestly think the action of spending your whole turn to purge has kind of fallen behind some sort of power creep in Netrunner, that taking your entire turn to purge is almost impossible. There's vanishingly few board states where it makes sense, especially against the sort of decks we're seeing. And I'd argue that there's some board states when it in fact makes literally no sense. And I think the most of the reasons why is like the Nobkri virus decks are not hurt by it that bad. Because the Imp is just going to keep going, the Audrey is just going to keep going, they're just going to simulchip cook back in. I think purging is generally in a very difficult spot. That having more cards that allow you to purge in some sort of purge way is okay. Now, it's worth noting we've had operations, as much as they haven't had this exact sort of cool utility, that allow you to purge virus counters. In fact, there's one right now in the standard format. It's called Reverse Infection. This obviously sees no play. And I'm not surprised because we have, mind you, very importantly, we have a virus infection, and that's the sort of purge I actually really care about, mid-turn purge, because that's the sort of way that you can save a whole turn to purge, let alone get somebody when they encounter a piece of ice and you purge their Audrey as much as they're still going to simulchip it. But that gives you some flexibility that you actually can like dunk on a Botulus or purge a Clot or all this sort of cool things. So if you ask me, having ability to purge on the runner's turn is so much more important in right now in standard than to purge on your turn. That being said, remove all virus counters from one installed card is not a purge. It is worth saying we saw some cards on boss stream that make purging much more difficult. I honestly think that's kind of a part that I'm scared about. I think making purging harder than it should be, and already right now in standard it is very hard to purge, is not a thing I'm really excited about, because now we're just having less decisions based on Netrunner. Having to take a whole turn off to purge, again, I think purging should take 2 clicks. I'll be honest, that has a huge impact on the game. You need to balance around it. But spending your whole turn to purge, mind you, original Netrunner, you'd have to spend 3 clicks to purge. They could be on different turns, which is really weird. They just have to be consecutive clicks. That's really awkward. But removing all virus counters from one installed card, I think it has some use cases, but I don't think it's as flexible as you want it to be. I don't think you can largely play this unless it's some weird combo deck. I don't think this slots into a lot of decks, but if you're removing virus counters for an operation, at least hopefully threat matters and you're like playing Providivhost. I don't think this card is good enough for a slot unless you're a combo deck, unless you're Providivhost. And then what are you removing virus counters for? I think like the best case is Fermenter, because removing virus counters from like an Audrey doesn't really make sense. From an Imp doesn't make any sense. Assuming you're playing a Nobkri deck, like I don't know why you'd play this. Amakua, mind you, is actually an interesting card considering we've got a lot of support. We recently saw on Monday that just kind of dunks on a virus from orbit. So like purging an Amakua is actually really important in the criminal matchup. So I don't know. Sandstone, yeah, but that's the thing. Is like Sandstone is like such a cool thing, but like spending a card in your deck to purge your Sandstone, like come on, deck slots, right? We got a deck slot problem. Could be good on Conduit, yes. But if you ask me, would I rather play Mavirus over this? Yes. So the only deck that I want to play this is where getting 2 advancements are actually really, really important in some sort of combo, and then the virus thing is a situational thing. Because I still think going into the modern meta, playing multiple copies of Mavirus is probably correct. Maybe even harder to do now, unfortunately, because of upcoming Anarch support. The one cool thing you can do with this is like really kind of cool, which is, again, in Providivhost, you can play Vladisibirsk on like really cool tempo, because you actually can fast advance 3 2s from hand and 4 2s with little support. Because if there's a Vlad on the table and they've run and you put 1 advancement on the Vlad grid, on your turn you can install a 4-2 agenda. You can, what's this called? I don't want to say the name wrong. You can business as usual. That's a cool name. Advance the Vlad once, advance the agenda once, advance the agenda again, and you can fast advance out of 4-2. You can also fast advance 3-2 straight from hand. I think that's neat. But the sort of like use cases for this, and maybe Jinteki trap decks, but I'd argue again, like Seamless Launch, Trickle Light, maybe those are fine too. I think for 1 influence, you could do worse than that though. So I don't know if this is a generalist Weyland card, which again, why is it attached to the Nuvum story? Like this is not a Nuvum card as much as like in every cheap operation is better than Nuvum because you get 2 credits, right? Acacia exists. Acacia's not good. Diogen, like that's actually the big problem right now is Acacia's particularly not great in a lot of the virus decks right now. And I'll purge to give you 6 credits. I don't care because the problem is the virus is not how much money you have. But the upcoming Anarch card that does punish purging is actually legitimately messed up. It's not unique. Not that Acacia is. I do think the great alongside installing Geist when hitting a turtle or conduit, but the virus function use case is niche. Yeah, it's niche. But I would not put a card in my deck that just puts 1 advancement on 2 cards. I don't think I would. And a lot of the thing is like, this also depends on how much ice we get that has like Mess Nachesvo pilled, right? Because Mess Nachesvo is exactly what you want. A card that you always want to have 1 advancement on it, but you never want to advance it yourself unless you built the last. Or Prov deal with it well. If we have more cards like this, then the single advancement clause makes more sense. But getting that 1 more advancement on your tree line is not worth a card slot if you ask me. So kind of hard. Could fit into Grinder Nuvum. It's an operation, advance some ice, get some virus purge, and all threat because we're on 5/3s. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's like, this is a filler card that maybe on some board states have flexibility. I think, again, threat 3 is also really important that you're probably playing a deck with only 5/3 agendas because you want this to be online as soon as possible, but while still having as many punitive windows, I guess, as you can. I love Mess Nachesvo. Yeah, Mess Nachesvo is really good. Spiff, do you think NSG chose the cards to spoil it because the art or story matches up? I'll be real, this might be oversharing a bit, but I think something happened internally because I was, generally you're told like what kind of cards are going to be spoiled during spoiler season. And this card was not a card I saw earlier. So there was a card that was meant to be spoiled in the spot that was a bit more of a Nuvum support card that seems to be shifted around. And that's a lot of reasons why that could be the case. There's a lot of content creators that signed up for spoilers too late. And so I think NSG going out the way to get people to get good stuff sooner than that makes sense. Like maybe they move things around. And I think that's cool. I think we're obviously going to see Nuvum support. I think the bigger reason why this ended up here though is because it lines up with Patrick's story really well. Because the story basically is this card, the art. And I think that's the bigger reason. So it's a mixture. Mind you, I like Patrick's story a heck of a lot. And this lines up more with the story than it does with making Nuvum make sense. So in the future for sure. There's been a lot of viruses that grow on their own, which has slowly dropped purge value over the years. Yes. On top of that too, we've seen a couple cards that are like trash this when they purge, which also doesn't interact favorably with business as usual. Like there's a difference between remove virus counters and purging, especially if you have cards that actually trash themselves. Pretty sure I know which one you mean. And yes, it got swapped out for the story. Yeah, that makes sense. So there was a card that makes more sense with Nuvum that we just haven't seen yet. And obviously there's going to be more Nuvum support cards. I wish I could deck build immediately with Nuvum, and I feel like it's not worth doing it because we haven't seen Nuvum payoff cards just yet. But again, community spoiler season, I think we're going to see it soon. Weyland Snare coming from the Panic Snares. I like Nuvum deck. He had Fires from Archives too, right? Oh man. Anyways, that's my thoughts. I'm genuinely excited for Nuvum. But I just wish we saw more of what it's capable of because currently we just have the text box to work with. This one's going to be neat. I like the flavor of it. I think this is harder to use. And this is going to be a card that shows up in spots that you don't expect it to show off. And it'll probably be better than you think it is. But it's more of a utility card than like build a deck around card, I think. I specifically requested some more narratively related cards for the fiction previews and wanted to save some of the more mechanically crunchy cards for the content creators to have fun with. I wonder if that's... I respect that, obviously, as a content creator, but like... Oh man, I don't know. When we had our conversations on our local, like Montreal, and Nuvum came out, it was like the conversation couldn't go that deep because we're like, we still don't know what to do with this, right? Space Camp reprint. I think this card came up as like a Space Camp facsimile in one of the daily casts where it's like, you know, Weyland has to go out of the way to make Weyland look cool. And Space Camp is a nice way to do it. As much as it's not evil, Hearts and Minds doesn't seem potentially like overtly evil, which is good. What would the Weyland Snare be? Meat damage and program trashing? Yeah, but you probably can't put both on the same card. We've seen like the Weyland Snare with there was what is it? Sapper? That is technically this subroutine fires wherever you access it, not in archives, right? Well, the card is getting swapped out did kind of throw a spanner. Yeah, I believe it. It's not the strongest criticism, but yeah, that is definitely a big change. Hedge Fund is a utility card rather than to build around it. Utility is good. Hedge Fund is a card that needs to exist for you to play Netrunner. I think that's different. I wouldn't call Hedge Fund a utility card. I think Hedge Fund is a base economy card. Utility cards are like the last 46 to 49 cards you put in your deck so you can do something neat. Hedge Fund's not neat. Force Connection? Yeah, Force Connection doesn't fire from archives though. It's cool. Okay, moving on. Next up. I think Force Connection is slightly better than it looks. This is the one I thought would be dropped soon. But it makes more sense to do Runner Corp Runner. Getting organized, Anarchs in a liberation cycle. So we see Sebastião Souza Pessoa. The new Anarch identity. We've been really looking forward to Sebastião. I think Sebastião is sick. I think there's a lot of ways you can build Sebastio. In some ways, it turns out to be a bit more limited than we might have guessed, on the fact that whenever you take one or more tags, if you had no tags, is a clause that shows up on a lot of cards. So in short, Sebastio, activist organizer, identity Gmod. Whenever you take one or more tags, if you had no tags, you may install one connection resource from your GEP, paying 2 less. So getting tags is good for you as long as it's your first tag that turn, or not that turn specifically, because this is actually whenever. That's really important. As an additional cost to trash a connection resource with a basic action, the corp must trash 1 card from HQ. Destroy the mechanism of domination, art by Matthias Kalza. I don't think I get much from that flavor text. Seems pretty obvious what's going on here, but Sebastio is really cool. And having this sort of like connection tribal in Anarch, where it's clear about like people working together, your community, your family, is fantastic. And connection tribal is sick. The new DJ Fenris target, yo, Diogen, for real, this being a Fenris target is probably incredibly niche. I can't imagine it. But the worst part in some ways is that people are going to have to internalize this text. And I think a lot of people that are going to play Sebastio are going to internalize Sebastio's text. But this is one of the most difficult, not to parse, but maybe to remember if you don't play Sebastio, what this ability does. That understanding, do I DJ into this? What does Sebastio do again? I'm glad that it's going to be so niche, because I do think there's going to be Sebastio players and non-Sebastio players. And this is one of the most complicated text blocks we've ever seen on a runner, period. While OP is really easy to understand, technically, like you can explain it in one sentence as much as it's very rules complete, this one's actually really hard to parse. In terms of like, if I explain to you what Sebastio does, it takes a bit of work. That's not bad. I think it's really interesting, but just keep in mind, if you want to Fenris this, you probably have to know what it says. And it's easier to Fenris into like Los or Quetzal, I guess. Time to throw Seb's friends under the bus. I think the Slums preview is out. Yeah, I think it's been out for a while. I think when we stream started. So if you want to check out the Slums cast, it's out there. You can check it. I don't know what cards they have. I think the article says. Magic and Forex flip switch NFL install, and you just trigger Sebastio on every click. You can do it. You can do it. It's whenever. It's not first time. It's whenever. So yeah, you could do it. It's probably a ridiculous setup, but let's talk about what this is. So firstly, whenever you take a tag, that's going to be really important, because you need the card pool to support some ways for you to give yourself tags. You cannot just hope that your opponent is going to tag you, because they're largely not most of the IDs you're playing. So you have to make this relevant by having cards that give you tags. And luckily, there's a bunch of cards previewed in this article. There's 2 cards that do give you tags. Mind you, they both say only play this if you're not tagged, which is really kind of forcing the archetype that you are an untag me runner, that you're tag off runner, because you want to take a tag, remove a tag, take a tag, remove a tag. And when you remove the tag, seems to be sometimes more often than not at the beginning of your following turn, which is hard because you're playing connections, and connections are resources, and corps can trash resources if you're tagged. That's where the second text box comes in. Of course, if you trash a connection resource with a basic action, the corp must trash a card from HQ. That's doable, but that is relatively expensive. And funny enough too, that is actually HQ pressure, which is important, because it's kind of like sabotage. If the corporation is going to do this, which I think a lot of corporations might not consider that, they just be like, they're safe. You should be trashing connections, I reckon. And I think good players are going to call when that makes sense, as much as it's going to feel like Sebastio has an unending army of redundant connections. So like, buckle up. But for what it's worth, that is HQ pressure, because you're generally going to be throwing out your worst cards from hand. And it kind of, again, feels like ESA, where then ESA can run HQ with the legwork and get the agendas because all the bad cards have been sabotaged. So same idea. If you eye for IHQ, that's pretty good. I think while Seb is pretty wordy, the concept is relatively straightforward. Discount installing connection, S-cross trash connection. I agree. I don't think it's the hardest thing. It's just like understanding on what happens on which one, I think is going to be a bit tricky. This actually protects the DJ Fenris itself, which is kind of fun. The unending army problem is like when runners contest asset spam. Yes. Yeah. I hear you. As much as I do think the problem, the way that you win against asset spam is they run out of stuff to put on the table. And I do think that's the big thing with Sebastio, is that you have to have pretty good card draw for this to be relevant, because inherently removing tags, barring networking, is a bit tricky, and making sure you have enough connections to install, you're going to need good card draw. And I think the only card draw card we have in connections right now is, unless you're playing Proco, is what's it called? Is Lago, which, yeah, it seems good. Lago's good. So the cards that tag you, we have a bunch of really good criminal stuff. I'm like really excited to play Rogue Trading, because Rogue Trading is just one of my favorite cards. And Rogue Trading, if you can make it make sense, is spend 2 clicks to gain 6 credits and install a connection for largely next to free. That's obviously very good. You have to figure out how to clear the tag. And no surprise here, like Solidarity Badge is the big one. And I'm actually confused about this, because, well, we see one card. How do you play Solidarity Badge in Sebastio? I don't know how you do it. Because you have to constantly be trashing corpse cards, which makes you think, are you playing Audrey? Are you playing Imp? Are you playing the full virus engine? Because I think that's really tricky. Urosh, can we expect some tutorial on deck building in the future? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. There's some like really generalist principles that probably should get into a video, but how's it going? Welcome to the channel. Just play 3x eye for an eye. I don't think that's enough. But I also don't think that like there might actually be a fair few decks that are playing Sebastian that are not playing Solidarity Badge. Because we have a bunch of ways in faction, mind you, check out Neon Statics. They showed up a bunch of not only payoff cards, but I think there was a tag removal card, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there's a tag removal card. That there's ways to make it work. Obviously, like no free lunch just becomes a bit better, just because it's fine. You have a panic button, like it's okay. I think networking is worth playing. I think the real hard thing with networking is if you're playing the sort of like trash from hand synergy packages. I know Neon Static was playing 0 in some of their versions. This can be a bit trickier because if you lose this to damage, you lose a lot of value. So I think you have a different value proposition if you're playing networking, but networking makes more sense than ever because you're a tag me archetype that wants to clear the tags, and this becomes a better economy card the longer it's going into. Sangren has a good deck building video for in the meantime. Oh, that's true. Yeah. It's like around System Gateway era, which is a nice like way to get into it. But if you search Sangren SC, Urush, you can probably find it. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I know it's good. Hippo? Yeah, Hippo is a thing, but like you can't build your whole draw engine, let alone not draw engine, your clear tag engine off of this, right? Because it's 3 hippos and you need breakers. Eric, favorite card spoiled so far? Shit. That's a hard question. It's probably Sebastial, let's be honest. Because like, despite Sebastian kind of railroading you into play untag me, I still think there's reasons to play tag me. And I think all the players that are excited to play tag me Sebastian are like the old Netrunner boomers trying to force counter surveillance into stuff, which like sign me up. But I think it's probably Sebastian because I think there's a lot of flexibility in the build. As much as obviously there's pain points in the deck, I think card draw is gonna be really tricky. I think reality plus matchup, like, don't want to play it. That's probably Sebastian by a mile. There's a friend-to-friend tag. Yeah, we've seen some cards on Monday. Mind you, I'm not going to pull up cards from other content creators this week. Mind you, go check out their stuff. Leave a comment in their comment section, like their video. But I think that's good. I think it's hard to play CS with the new tag cards. Yes, it's really, really hard to play counter surveillance with the new tag me cards. Because the new tag me payoff cards, they only work if you're not tagged. In fact, Sebastian's ability only works if you're not tagged. So I think forcing tag me on Sebastian is probably going to fail because it doesn't seem to work. I can't wait for tag me to die when rotation happens. I think that's a bit of a bummer. I think tag me is a cool design space. As much as like it's only a cool design space, you know, if every, you know, faction can deal with it in some interesting way. I think the Anarch tag me deck will use Seb stuff and Hosh, let's be honest. I don't know, because you can't really play this stuff in tag me. It depends on like the other connections. So honestly, the thing that spooks me is about new ID. R+ is going to be eating concerningly good. Yeah, because like we said this earlier in the stream, R+ doesn't care how you get the tag. I think there's been some assumption that R+ only gets a tag, the 2 credits or 2 card draw if you give the runner a tag. But unfortunately, it's just good luck. Like, enjoy your free 18 credits or whatever. Like, that's just going to just feel bad. And I don't know how to rectify that. So we got 2 payoff cards. Mind you, we didn't see connections. And I wish we saw at least a connection. But it's really important to have tag me cards. Otherwise, Sebastian's ability is a bit less inconsistent. So these are also very important. I just think I'm more excited about connections because connections are fun. Play only if you're not tagged. How much money do you want to bet you're going to see like some silly streamer next week on JNet mashing eye for eye, be like, why won't it let me run this? Ah, JNet, I think that's there's a bug, and I'm just going to hit the button, and then chat on the 7-second delay is going to be like, you're tagged. And I'm going to be like, oops. Seba's hope is not good. He looks like peak install runner, also super polarized. I agree to some extent, right? Like it's a stall runner with like combo payoff, right? Like the idea that I'm going to install this connection and then Eero and then run archives and C5 or whatever the math works out to, right? Like so far Sebastian doesn't have a big incentive to interact. And so I do think, again, that's like the rogue trading problem is like sit back and just like make your value engine and be annoying. And I don't know what the disruption looks like. Like corps probably just have to rush out. Will you get a triggered ID when you get oppoed? Yeah, it's good. That is not the worst. Oh man. Yeah, that's a big thing too, is when you get oppoed, any tag punishment turns your ID off. We've never seen that before. Imagine having it, mind you, besides resources inherently, but getting oppoed and then having to clear the tags, and you should have tag removal in your deck. Maybe it's not that bad, you have networking, but just having a blank ID and blank cards in your hand because you've been oppoed. Like that seems really rough. That seems hard. I'm strongly in the card being banned does not equal bad card camp. D, I know you wrote your article about the recent banned card. What's that in response to? Wanting to take one tag, it turns particularly harsh into power plus. Yeah, and you can take more than one tag, mind you. Seb does not say first time, it's whenever, so you could do it. You can. But also that deck might be running single tag punishment that goes outside trashing resources. My favorite card so far is the new HB op in the process, Corporate Hospitality. What do you think about that one, Eric? Because I saw that and I was like, I thought NSG was scared of recursion, and I'm scared of recursion. I know the process folks weren't too into it, but like it seems like it reminds me of, like, this is not flattering, but like not great Netrunner. Like it reminds me of like the mixture, and this is just reflexive. Like it reminds me of, oh, when we used to have kind of pretty good on tempo, what they're called, clearances, and then recursion. The Tag Me Death comment, a lot of Tag Me cards got banned, but a lot of them were really interesting and fun for their time. Yeah, I agree. Gain 2, draw 2, add Rashida to your hand, install Rashida. Yep. I don't know. I'm surprised to see a card like that, because you're right. At least it's recursion that accelerates the game. The way the Spin Doctor is different because it forces card draw. But yeah, gain 2, draw 2. Mind you, play a Nuvum, gain 2 more credits, and install a Rashida. Like, it's recursion. Seems like the 2 credits in archive memory is tied to drawing 2 cards. Yes, yeah. Trust Operations donk. Honestly, yes, Trust Operation is looking better and better. You can trash stuff. We're probably going to see some Big Ice too. Like, I think we've been hinted at saying Big Ice. Like, Trust Operation is unfortunately a lot of influence. It's like 3 influence. But yeah, any sort of like non-destructive, well, even destructive tag-based stuff is pretty reasonable. Like even just like Scorched Earth into Mindscaping, like, okay, game over. As much as probably Steel Skin in hand. I feel similarly about Boat and Drago. I don't like Drago. I think Boat is like a cool Netrunner card. I don't think Drago is a cool Netrunner card, but Boat is like a cool Netrunner card, but it's just like one number slightly off. Excellent cards. I'm glad that they're going to be memorialized on the ban list. Yeah. Tag Me cards were good cards. That's why they got banned. I think the Tag Me cards were banned because there wasn't sufficient counterplay and they made polarizing matchups. Right? Like that's what I'm kind of excited about Tag Me, because again, NSG has seeded the card pool, at least the HB card pool, with reasonable tag punishment that you can play in faction and not feel bad about, and helps with the matchup. And I think that's nice. And back in the day, we didn't really have that. So the sort of matchup spread when you played Tag Me versus non-Tag Me was incredibly polarized. It's like, oh, HB matchup, free value. I'm going to draw 20 cards with Liza. And I didn't like that. They did add a bunch of imp-like effects, so maybe they wanted to balance increased corp trashing recur effects. Yeah, I'm just not excited for that Cold War, right? Where it's like, it seems like every runner so far has got massive, mind you, this card, which I don't think is my favorite disruption HQ card we've seen in the set so far, but every corporation or every runner has got like really massive corporation HQ disruption. Balancing that by just getting recursion, like, I don't know. I feel like we're just seeing and sawing back and forth. But yeah, this one says play only if you're not tagged, cost 1, run HQ, successful, take a tag, and access an additional card. Mind you, this can compound with other card access effects. Like, so if you can see more cards, that's relevant, because access, trash 1 card from your grip, trash the card you are accessing. It's 4 influence, which is a lot. So basically it's a soft multi-HQ access card, you know, somewhere between Jailbreak, as much as you don't draw a card. Taking a tag is on tempo for you, assuming you built your deck in Sebastian the right way, which you should. And then you can trash cards selectively from your hand, not random, to trash the card you're accessing. This obviously makes Carnivore look a bit silly, but that's not that hard considering what virus decks look like right now. And the fact that you can choose the card means that, again, it's a good payoff card for the sort of trash from hand synergy packages like Strike Fund and Steel Skin for sure. Again, we talked about also, if people are trashing connections, Sebastian inherently has some HQ pressure because they're going to be trashing their worst cards in hand. So then generally the good cards in hands are the ones you're more likely to line up to eye for an eye. But this one seems really expensive because considering the sort of damage you're putting on turn by turn in the virus Anarch packages, and maybe Sebastian can't play those engines, this seems like something that Anarch can already do relatively well. I even think Burner's a better card than this, and it obviously in a different faction and does something different. This seems a bit expensive, and I think this only seems really good if the tag is such a good benefit for you and you don't have other good ways to play tags. I don't know. Trading a card for a card with the corporation doesn't feel fantastic unless very specifically you're hitting Strike Funds and Steel Skins very consistently, because I do think Sebastian just needs a lot of cards inherently, because you're generally trading like events to like clear tags and like one shot like tag removals, and you need a lot of connections. This one seems tricky to me, and I don't know if I'd play it out of faction because tag is such an expensive cost. Because if this, you know, say that you're not playing Sebastian and you have to clear the tag normally, like this is a double that costs 3. That's a lot. That's a heck of a lot. I want to see more Shaper and Crim stuff. Yeah, me too. We've seen no Shaper cards so far, right? No Shaper cards so far? I think Seb is competitive. It's going to be where you playing tag punishment anyways and not get drowned in value, which play. I assume they drop the next day or two. Yeah. Friend of a Friend is insane. Friend of a Friend is really good. Friend of a Friend is very, very good. I think also this card is like really wild. It does a lot. Again, I'm surprised to see this much recursion, but play if you're not tagged, 0 cost, really nice. Run archives instead of breaching, take a tag. So you're not going to see the cards. You also don't flip the cards if I'm not mistaken. Whenever you take a tag with this event, really interesting wording, you may install a research from your hit ping 2 less. This very specifically is not connection, which is really easy to miss, but like run archives, get seb value, get a daily cast down for 1. Ideally, you're playing this with threat 3. When you take a tag with this event, you may install a program from your heap. That's paying costs, very importantly. So what are you recurring with this? Like probably Fermenter, maybe an imp because you're playing some amount of trash package. Maybe you lost, you know, a breaker. Okay. I don't know what else. I think we're seeing a lot of weird utility cards recently and some of the last spoilers, so that makes sense. I think you generally want to play this on threat 3. But mind you, running archives to get a tag, to save 2 credits, install a card, and then install another card for 2 cards less, like that's a lot of value in a single card. And currently Seb has a lot of payoff for specifically running archives, because Eero is definitely going to be showing up sooner than later. That I honestly, one of the servers I want to ice up first is actually archives. That being said, maybe not that first, because you're not going to privilege access on the first 2 turns, I think. But like denying this denies a lot of value, because this is one of the very good payoff card for Seb in general. I'm surprised. Just the previous screenshot is the Shaper Scoop. Oh yeah, Burner, you're right. Yeah, Burner. Yeah. 2 influence, this is like on the cusp of considering. Again, taking a tag is a really, really expensive cost. And no faction is literally clearing tags that well. Mind you, we've seen other Sebastian support cards, and those are a bit splashable. I'm hoping for like some neutral thing that works, just because like clearing tags and Shaper is an absolute nightmare right now. But yeah, you could consider seeing this as a thing. At the end of the day too, like if you really want this kind of ability in Anarch, outside of Sebastian, like, do you not just play Katurga? People forget Katurga exists, and like Katurga is like surprisingly more generous recursion than you thought you'd see in Netrunner. So I can't tell on what side I feel about this, but it is definitely a very good power payoff card. But yeah, it does just feel like strapping value onto value onto value onto a single card, and Seb just seems like an absolute value brick. Privileged access, I forget who called it Praxis in one of the streams, and I love that name. Is it great to recur your friend of a friend? Yeah, I think that's going to be really important, Nemirov, is that we've seen some of the connections that are really important for clearing tags, and if one of those costs, say, 2 to 3 credits, recurring that to turn on the rest of your engine is pretty gross, and you get these weird feedback loops where the value just dumps onto value and the dumps onto value. So icing archive seems really important. Yeah, Smasher seems interesting. I agree that so far we've seen more cards about installing than we've seen running. And admittedly, this card I'm not the most sold on. I think you can build a totally competent Smasher deck without even considering this and playing like more generically good HQ pressure. So I'm interested to see. Hard to agree considering throwing a nice archives when you see Seb ID across the table. Yeah, I think you do. I don't think you do turn 1. I think you do turn 2 or 3. Networking is the only thing that comes to mind for clearing tags, which happens to be flavorful for Seb. Yeah, it's really cool flavorful for Seb. Mind you, if you want to check out Neon Static, we saw a console, which is cool. It's a draw engine too, which I think is really important, as much as the timing of when you remove a tag, it's kind of conflicting. And I think we saw multi-access stuff, and then we saw tag removal economy, which is really, really, really great. Eye for Eye is secretly a wanton reprint. Yes. Sort of. Do you know what's a wanton reprint? It's just douche. But yeah, it's not bad. It's weird. We see so much HQ disruption in the set so far, and this is not my favorite one. And it just seems really expensive on cards. And admittedly, again, if you're playing the trash package, which you probably are, considering I think Lago is really good and Seb wants card draw, we'll see how it works out. But I'm really excited to build for Seb. That's 100% very, very obvious. All right, we're going to drop by, I think, only 2 more stops here. Again, not going to be the longest stream today because I still have to finish the spoilers video and pretty behind on that. So that's going to come out tomorrow. Well, let's hope. D dropped this article. It was on our prediction list whether there be a ban list update, and there is. 1 card has been banned. D goes through it, and it's basically Formicaries being banned. Not a surprise. Formicaries, mind you, has just been kind of pretty crunching on the design space itself, because this is a card that forces approach steps to happen twice. For the uninitiated, you run a server, and then the server has something that says when you, what is it, approach, right? When the runner approaches the server, they have to spend 2 clicks or 5 credits. So they do that. And then because it's still doing the same timing window, then you can res a Formicary, move it to that server or slide it in if it's on the same server, or even just res it if it's on the same server. And then the runner has to approach Formicary. They get through the subroutine, which sometimes is trivial to get through depending on the deck. And then they have to hit the same Managarm again. And just the existence of Formicary means any card that has a very powerful when the runner approaches the server step has to be balanced around a world in which it can happen more than twice, which is really, really difficult. Can we unban Kayambe now? I don't know. I'm not excited about Kayambe. I'll be honest, I'm not excited about advanceable ice in general. I think there's a chance you could, but I think it's much more likely that NSG is going to put out a card similar to Kayambe even as soon as his upcoming set, because there seems to be a lot of weird support for advanceable stuff that doesn't make sense. So there's probably going to be something like this that pays it off. That's my best guess. But yeah, Formicary gone. That actually has an impact. Not because we're seeing the Formicary Managarm combo so much. Obviously, this is also in big context because Stegodon and D-Res and specifically in HB is going to matter in just a second when we read an upcoming article. But those sort of decks are probably going to pay a wider card pool, which is probably quite healthy. And yeah, Weyland decks like Op decks are kind of an interesting spot. Advanced Ice are a Netrunner institution. They are. But I don't think they're a good institution. I think we saw this at Worlds. I think Advanceable Ice is interesting when it's interesting. And I think like Mest and Chesfo it's pretty good. It's really good. And Advanceable Ice, when it's just not just like brute force, I'm going to sit back and make my defenses stronger, is not good Netrunner. I don't know. I don't like Netrunner where the ice just gets bigger. I think Netrunner is more interesting when the interactions are a bit more nuanced than just like, oh, well, now it costs me 19 credits to run this remote server. I don't know. I don't know how to rectify that. But on average, I think smaller ice, mid-range ice is more interesting. And having a massive tree line is like, it's just money and math. And the game goes back to like, okay, I probably should not be interacting that much and should be calling tempo. It's a weird thing because I think obviously Glacier needs to get some sort of support. But when the Glacier is like, I'm going to start scoring out on turn 14 because I'm sitting back advancing my build to last stuff, like I don't think that's interesting. I don't know. Pharos is barf? Yeah. I kind of agree. I like that Pharos doesn't have infinite scaling, but I just don't like the fact that corporations can't afford to sit back and just advance their ice. And I think this is compounded by the fact that, again, 5-3 agendas, playing as slow and defensively as possible, it just does not make it for exciting games. Money and math, I think, applies to this D-Res package. Jason Ford, I totally agree. And the math is even worse. The math is unbearably bad. I am not excited. Curtain Wall was great. Curtain Wall was great only because it was overstated. Curtain Wall existing as a card, no thank you. Funny enough, 10 strength, we've seen that before, but Curtain Wall when attached to oversight AI, and back then we even had other ways to deal through it, that's a fun challenge. We're spending 14 credits to break with a Corroder. It's kind of a thing that you want to do now because it's worth something. So I agree, yes and no. I don't know. I don't like big ice. I don't like putting ice out and just being, I'm going to advance it every turn. What are you going to do? And it's really hard for you to win the game that quickly because they're running 6 agendas and 44 cards, right? I don't know. There's ways to make big ice interesting, and I just don't think advancing the ice infinitely is that cool. How much Vingo Tyrant? Bad. Bad. Luckily now here, at least we have like load-bearing Hush, but the same sort of idea is that if I sat back and just continually advanced my Misfingo turn after turn after turn, like it's obviously really slow on tempo, but if I'm playing a 5-3 deck that understands like, you're a run-based deck, you're like, just watch Worlds. And the Worlds game was way more exciting than it had the right to be, which is so lucky. Like the Worlds final was kind of sick. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't like advanceable ice that much. The coolest big ice is tier, and it's not advanceable. It's something we can agree on. Okay, yeah, that's true. Okay, so Formicary's gone. I think that's going to be very important in context. There is a card revealed here, which I think is worth looking at after we look at the other stuff, which is directives. I haven't read the story yet. I've heard good stuff about it. I've liked Calvin Wong's story so far. Apologies. We'll definitely read it, and then we'll tell you what we think. But it's great. Check it out for sure. Begamod Gaming. Yeah, right. I'm on the fence about the new ID, the D-Res support, but I do want to hear your thoughts on it because I'm pretty optimistic about a funky new HB archetype. Okay, so this is the new ID. Peace through power. All right. Could be a Weyland ID name. Identity Division 4515. Whenever you res a piece of AP or destroyer ice during a run, that ice gets +1 strength and gains subroutine and the run unless the runner trashes one of their installed cards. Their choice. After its other subroutines for the remainder of that run. Not for the turn, for that run. Strength in the palm of your hand. It's really, if I had a dime every time one of the NSG Corp identities in this set talked about their hands, I would have 2 dimes, and that's just kind of weird. Sam, finally catching you live. Thanks for being such a great researcher. New players 2024. Like so, Sam, welcome to the game. How's it going? Welcome. This is a short stream today, unfortunately, but glad you can join it and leave a comment. Remember being excited by the Stellar Ice and being disappointed that they suck? Yeah. Yeah, me too. It seemed fun, which is fine. Wormhole was cool. Wormhole was notable because high strength sentries were super rare back in the day. Like it was actually the best advanceable ice, arguably. I like space ice. Okay, so hear me out. Thunderbolt Armaments wants to play AP or Destroy Ice in HB and gets a lot better value from it. Meanwhile, Andre on the Metropole Grid is on, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thanks for tuning in. And he is getting really upset because he agrees that one of the best things that you can do just to win games is play Sysanton and HB. Meanwhile, NSG is like, I have a really cool idea. What about if we make an ID that wants you to play Sysanton in every HP deck and you can face check on turn 1 and die? Wow! Genuinely, this might not be the worst thing to do, is unironically put Sysanton in HB, and like, I'm still on the ban Sysanton train. I'm genuinely on the ban Sysanton train because I do not think a 5-cost ice that's reservable on turn 1 should end the game out of nowhere. Call connection when Sebastian face checks into this. Turns out you win the game, or sorry, resource, right? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't like it that there's a deck full of AP or Destroyer. Okay, more reasonably, when it comes to AP or Destroyer, those types of ice generally trash programs or hurt you. It's a weird mix on those two, on the basis that the way that you deal with Destroyers is don't install programs. The way you deal with AP is install generally your killer before. So largely, the cost of face checking into Thunderbolt armaments is relatively high because it's genuinely a coin flip. Because I think you should be playing some Jinteki Ice that does damage in your deck, because even things as simple as Tithe get relatively pretty good in this deck. And mind you, we have to talk about D-Res. This is a card that's really easy to D-Res and works with the package, but Snare wins loads of games on turn 1. I agree. So like, you should be playing some mixture of Destroyer Ice, Fundamental Ice that doesn't deal with Thunderbolt because you still need to end the run on a more consistent basis, and AP Ice. So I generally don't know how to face check in this. Hey Cat, happy spoiler season as well. We got to see some good keys for art. Congratulations. Is there more art coming? I hope there is. So I don't know what to do about this, because the face check in this is going to tilt me the same way that the face check playing against like, what's it called? Not Ampere. Ampere is going to get me, where I just face check on turn 1 into the Sysanton and I lose the game. Fairy's long gone. I feel like you're mostly fine as long as you have installed your killer. Yeah. Is that cool? I don't know. So you have to rush down your killer. If this card sees play, like you're going to start seeing, multiple revolvers and before you start face checking to stuff. I just do not like it that we have now legitimately play Sysanton and HB energy. I don't like it. Don't like it at all. Now, mind you, this needs to get value from D-Res. It does need to get value from D-Res, and we're going to see some other D-Res support cards. Mind you, we did see a card that works directly with Identity. That's different than most of the other spoilers we've seen. Okay, I'll give the Anarch one some slack. This card is interesting, even outside of Thunderbolt. It's like kind of okay. Is there only one non-sentry Destroyer and it's Hagen? Yes, and Hagen is even better in this. This is another thing that I don't like. Ice gets +1 strength and gains. Okay, Ice getting strength and losing strength is something we've seen on a lot of the HB cards, mind you. We're talking about Brasilia Government Grid in a second, a lot of strength gain, and of course we're going to be talking about a fair bit about Stegodon, which is even better in this ID. And strength gaining on Ice, I don't like. Because, mind you, I need to preface this. When I get fired up about things I like and I don't like, they're not correct. This is just my take on things, how I see about the game. I'm not fundamentally correct. Just because you're watching this, you don't have to agree with me, and that's fine. Roast me in the comments, roast me wherever you want. It's good fun. But one of the least sexy things about Netrunner, especially for new players, is explaining to them how Ice works with interface and all that sort of stuff. And it becomes an integer math problem that is nobody's favorite part about Netrunner. Now, for a lot of players, to ensure the speed of the game is reasonably good, is they start shortcutting things. What does it cost Carmen to break Drafter? 4. What does it cost to break Godanzi? 5. Right? Like, we shortcut these things because we end up in situations to relieve the mental load. We go out of our way to do these sort of things, right? And with cards like Stegodon, one of my least favorite things about it, which is a very intensive card when it comes to memory, is that you are constantly forced to reevaluate break costs, and specifically for Stegodon, because we start hitting negative integers, the math becomes unbearable. It becomes really quite difficult when you have to understand, okay, now it costs the buzzsaw to break this, but if I jack out, I do this and do this and do this, and making the integer math the interesting part about the run is really, really, really rough. And we're seeing so many cards where the integer math is like the strength of the card. Like, congratulations, you now have to calculate what it costs to break this on top of Brasilia on top of Stegodon. How much is it going to cost to break an Ice on top of Brazilian on top of Stegodon? The math is impossible. It's very, very difficult, and you have to constantly do these calculations over and over and over again on different runs. Obviously, this has been play tested to some extent, so there's no reason that this is problematic. Mind you, on JNet, you just hit the check how much it costs to break button, and it tells you. But I'm so worried that we're having more IDs that like just slightly change the math on break costs, that we have constantly recalculate the worst part of Netrunner with this an unending flow of integer math. I love Stego because it's a funny tank, but I would shed a tear if it got banned. I don't know. Win through psychic damage. Is this just me? Like, the amount of math that's being added just to calculate what it costs to break through 2 ice is not great. I'm really worried about this. I feel like HB has always been the really complicated math to run with action. Remember IT department? Oh, man. Assume you can't break and confidently tell your opponent that they can fire the subs. Yeah, exactly. That's what it comes down to. On top of this too, right? Like, we're having so many ways to modify the strength. And this is something you have to keep in mind is people really dunk on things like bypass and boomerang and like, you know, all these other stuff that just like say, I don't care what the math is. And this is pushing me into that camp where I'm just gonna be like, I don't care what the math is. I'm putting a boomerang on it. I'll poison violet. I don't give a shit, right? Like, that's what's happening here. Increasing the ice, and admittedly there's some Cold War going behind the scenes about like, how do we beat Turbine? And the answer is just play more Turbines if this is gonna happen. Like, yeah, maybe it's a liability to rely on Buzzsaw if you don't get your Turbine down. I could see that, but like, I feel like there's other ways to tackle that. I don't even run on gut feelings, not math. That's why I always get flyline. Yeah, it's like we can't vibes-based run anymore. My hot take is that there's a D-Res deck that doesn't play Stego. I believe there's D-Res decks that don't play Stego. I don't think you need Stego. I just think there's so many weird things. Like, just adding +1. Like, did you ever play against Stronger Together? There's an HB identity. It's not very good. It just says all your Byros get +1 strength. And you know the amount of times, and admittedly because Stronger Together didn't see a lot of play, you had to tell the runner, actually, no, the math is slightly different and you're short and you did the math on the server wrong because you forgot the +1 strength aura. Right? Like, these sort of things are just like, it feels like they shouldn't matter, but adding +1 strength on the turn that it's rezzed means that I have to do the math, right? Hagen. So I need to run into a Hagen. Okay, Hagen's going to be 6 strength. I have 2 breakers that's -1, -1. And then they're going to res it, so it'll be +1. And then they might Brasilia to de-res their wave, so it's going to be +3. So how big is the... Like, what? I can't do that. I literally can't play Netrunner anymore if this is the thing. I don't, it's overwhelming. It is massively overwhelming. And I'm very worried about it because I'm worried that there's going to be some sort of mathematical load that is just going to be a problem. I figure really having Stronger Together Yogg conflict. Yeah, that one was just like, sorry, Yogg's not going to work. Sorry. Stronger Together is something that works between better in all digital format. Yes. Where like you could see the number physically change on the card. And even then it's going to get people by surprise because then you'd be like, I thought it was that 3x flip switch. Yeah, I know 3x flip switch, but like 3x flip switch seems pretty good right now. But the question is whether this is a viable identity, and at the end of the day, I honestly don't know. It depends on the support package, but this is the sort of thing that even if it's not good, I'm going to be absolutely crushed trying to play into this casually. Because the amount of math you have to do, and then the margins of error on the math being so high, because we're just in a swamp of AP or Destroyer Ice, is going to be gutting. It's going to be a problem. When you do the math slightly wrong and they Brasilia you, and then you take 3 net damage and trash your breaker and you die, like, ugh. It's also fun being on the corpse side and trying to math the runner can contest with their 15 credits. Yeah, you might as well do it together because honestly, neither of you know. We can just agree if you can get in or not. I don't know. I'm glad you even passionate hot takes. These are the things that come up with teaching new players. Integer math is corpse psychic damage for real. Alex, how's it going? It's really hard. I can't get over how much I think this is going to be tricky. I'm going to grug Bankar through this. Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. I'm going to just grug through this with like botulises and people will be like, why do we ban endurance? You know? Anyways, sorry, I haven't eaten a lot, so I'm pretty worked up, but like, I'm genuinely worried about a bunch of the things going on in this identity. I think HB, like we saw an economy card for this identity. That's pretty good. Is D-Res good? It's hard to make D-Res good. D-Res is a really big downside. That being said, the sort of cards that probably D-Res well are like harmonics. It's a weird spot to be in. The one thing I don't get the Thunderbolt is why would you want to D-Res your AP and Destroyer over on-res? And I don't know where it's the overlap. Like, I can only see it as a reg PD like deck. Yeah, it's hard. And like a lot of the AP or Destroyer Ice barring Tithe is like legitimately pretty expensive. You're anemone spamming, that will be fun. But like, do you want to D-Res a 6 cost on sell? And mind you, on sell is disgusting in this deck. I don't think so. There's support cards for it, but I honestly don't know. I can't tell you. So it's really tricky. And this might just be like the slow HB deck that like, if you can contest their economy, they don't have enough to do anything, which like we saw that consistently. That's a problem when you try to make HB aggressive and you pull away from fundamentals. It turns out a lot of the like the HB economy is balanced around fundamentals. And so like when you play the mediocre fundamentals in like a good, you know, kind of efficient HB deck, it's playable. But then once you put those cards that were kind of balanced around you being an efficient thing into like a more offensive thing, sometimes it's a struggle. We've seen this classically with HB. I think we've seen some support cards that doesn't like, I think you could afford to do this. Vovo, mind you, seems really good. Thunderbolt taught me that apparently I'm not an HB boy after all. We need to learn how to end runners now. Change the rule text for running to the players agree on total amount of money for the runner to spend then access. I think there's a fun ONR card, if I'm not mistaken, that you have to agree the maximum amount of money you can spend on the run before the run initiates, and any money that you overspend, you lose, which is like just nonsense. But the sort of thing I think an idea like this would really value, be like, how much do you think you're going to spend? And you're like, oh no, I don't know, 19, how much could this cost? Like, and then it turns out they just res a tithe. The new 10 cost Jinteki Ice is going to be AP. What's the new 10 cost Jinteki Ice? Oh, Snake. Yeah, almost definitely. Stavka, Sarevna, and Nemini seem to be big targets. The targets are weird, right? Like, obviously, look at the Destroyer in AP space. It's inconsistent. I still am worried about dying to Sisenton on turn 1. Like, I have no way to slice that differently besides, like, you should not die to face check on turn 1. You can. You will. That shouldn't exist in the card pool. But yeah, I don't have anything smart to say about this thing besides, like, I'm really scared of math. This is math. Price is right under rules. There should be an NBN ID. Carl's 8B. So runs are just traces now. Yeah, Morgan, runs are just traces in that world. That's exactly it. Oh, that's really funny though. Lightning Laboratory seems very powerful. It's weird. It only gets one agenda counter. I was pretty sure this would do 2. Whenever a run begins, you remove 1 hosted agenda counter to res up to 2 pieces of ice, protecting the attack server, ignoring all costs. When the turn ends, de-res 2 pieces of ice, protecting that same server. They can be different ice. This is also very scary because it's a sort of card that makes there hard to be windows for you to do anything intelligent, right? Like, that's the sort of idea, is that this HB deck is eventually going to run out of economy, and then you'd be like, I'm going to run R&D, what can they do? And then they Lightning Laboratory you like the scariest Jinteki snake possible, or you get a tear in the face, right? That's really frightening, because once one of these is scored, you enter a world in which face checking is like really, really hard, and you're just hoping that the corporation needs this later so they don't do it now. I don't know. When this gets scored, it's very, very powerful. And you can obviously compare it to Off-World Office, and it's not hard to get more than 7 credits on this, but I think it will slow the game down pretty consistently. Because if you're really scared of face checking into something that's going to destroy your programs that they can res literally for free on a board state that makes sense for them, I don't think you can face check anymore. And inherently, that's one of the ways you counterplay a deck with like really bad economy, is having windows in which they've overextended resing their 6 credit 4 subroutine on sell, and you can run R&D. That scares me. That really does frighten me, that there's no good windows to attack while this thing, besides running the servers in which specifically everything's already resed. And there's already a really big problem when it comes to de-res decks, that I think, unfortunately, it forces you to tunnel. I think this came up in the article, but de-res decks force you to tunnel. Specifically when it came to, like, you know, Stegadon. Stegadon says, de-res an ice on a different server. And a lot of the Stegadon gameplay I've seen so far, and obviously there's going to be challenged, is that you just want to run the one server that has resed ice, so Stegadon doesn't do anything. And it's obviously up to the corporation to force you to consider running a different server. And I don't think that's going to really change with some of the cards we saw. So like, all these sort of cards kind of force a playstyle where you just be like, I'm just going to run R&D over and over again, and hopefully that wins. Again, it's on your opponent to make that not the right case, but it also in some ways, like, the wrong play is to make a run on HQ, when now suddenly Stegadon's turned on and then they can Brasilia government grid. Right, like, there's a play pattern against, mind you, we'll read Brasilia government grid. It's a region, costs nothing, trash for 3 influence, that's pretty good. Whenever you res a piece of ice during a run against the server, you may de-res another installed piece of ice, anywhere. If you do, the res dice gets +3 strength for the remainder of that run, uses the ability once per turn. Thunderbolt naturally offered city hardening solutions. Art's fantastic, Kira doing it again. Like, this is the sort of thing, and it still works on the same server, mind you. But firstly, overload of integer math, and then very importantly, like, not running HQ ever might be a game plan that makes sense, because you don't want them to be able to de-res their cheap wave up there. And that's what worries me too, is like tunneling the same server is like a legitimately reasonable game strategy against this sort of deck. Métropole Grid hours. I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There's a lot of cool stuff going on with the set. It's just like a lot of this I'm not into. Tunnel, yeah, only run that server. So you've seen this maybe a lot of times with Stegadon, right? Whenever a run begins, you may de-res a piece of ice not protecting the attacked server. So the idea is that if you only run R&D, Stegadon will do nothing unless they can, on their own terms, res their own ice on a different server. So you basically turn off Stegadon by saying, I'm just going to run one server only and try and win exclusively off R&D, or just camp the remote server. It works. And it's actually one of the big downsides of Stegadon. It's just tunneling one server. There's not a lot of, right now, of corporation cards that allow you to res ice on your own terms. So I think tunneling is like technically not bulletproof against Brasilia, but like tunneling is a strategy for the HB deck. Yeah, de-res the innermost anemone. Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to make it fine, right? Like de-resing waves, I don't think is a big problem. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about harmonics ice, but like a lot of the harmonics ice is like really good into de-res. Right? Like de-resing pulses is like, as long as you can afford it, which again, load bearing, what's it called? Vovo. Like that's a good card to de-res. So there's a lot of ways that you can make that work well for you. And the +3 strength payoff is actually really huge and makes the math really hard because you're probably going to get +4 strength on some Sycenton that's just going to kill you. Like, that's the problem. You could run as soon as like turn 2 into remote server and it's going to be a 7 strength Sycenton. Are people not worried about this? Like, what? Okay, so you run HQ on turn 1 because they don't have credits. They res a wave. You're like, okay. Turn 2, you run the remote server. They have something behind it. They res a Brasilia government grid. They res a Sycenton. It has 4 subroutines, mind you, and end the run that doesn't really matter. They de-res their wave. It's a 7 strength Sycenton. What are you meant to do about that? Besides lose? Like, I don't get it. Brasilia Grid fixes the Stego AOT's problems, famously another stream fave ID. Yeah, AOT gets a lot of support with this, which I don't love. Install Airblade, Sycenton has been solved. Yeah, so you just take 3 net damage. Like, this is the thing that really scares me, is like giving all these weird mathematical strength boosts to a deck that can just like kill you. Just seems like strange. It does. I'm not excited for it. I'm genuinely not excited for it. So I don't know. Guess I'll die meme. Yeah, exactly. Ice trash deck's another solution. Yeah, trashing ice like destruction, which isn't the big thing. Obviously, it's good against this because they have less options. Hush is also really good, but Hush is good into everything ASG puts out. Andre's got the fear. I got the fear. Guy, how's it going? I got the fear. I don't know. Just genuinely scared. Just don't know what to think about it. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways. HB's nightmare tactics are working. I just need to be stung once. I just need a face check with Sebastião with a handful of resources because you know they're going to be there and die to Sycenton. It's that simple. Game over. 7 strength Sycenton turn 2. That's largely it. On that note, does Hush prevent the +3 from Brasilia? Whenever you res a piece of ice during a run against the server you made, if you do, no, because the text is on Brasilia, it's not on Hush. The only way to beat Brasilia is like a light the fire that blanks this. Very importantly, other cards that kind of have a similar structure like Zato City Grid gives the text to the card. So each piece of ice protecting this server gains. So that text, because it's in quotes, is on the card. So you can hush the Zato card. You cannot hush Brasilia because the text is on this. What we need is a new type of tokens, which are ice strength tokens, so you can slide them over the ice strength on the card as temporary adjustments. Genuinely, Alec, I'm so glad you said that, because I think I would love for Thunderbolt to come with, and maybe a community person will make this, is a token. This should have a token that anytime you res an ice, you should have a little token that has some nice HB art on it that says +1 strength and the run less the run trash and 1 installed cards, and you can host it on the card so people remember. I would love it if the set came with a token. I'd be surprised if it did, but like that is something I think the community should make and have it as tournament support, because that is really nice. It helps with the mental load. Even a +3 token if you're playing Brasilia, right? Like having that you can put on the ice to be like, just so you remember that's there. I think that would actually really help. I think that's really cool. I think tokens would actually really help at parsing this as much as we still have a math issue. We'll be back to 3x pinhole in every runner deck. Yeah, maybe. I think we're more likely to be back to like breaking ice without icebreakers. Like, it just seems so good. Like, I don't want to face check into it. I've been doing that dice for ice strength since next dice. Yeah, next dice, it makes sense because you have to do it. Obviously for Echo, you have to do dice, but just having something to be like, this is a temporary counter. Because I think I worry about dice is if I tick the ice up, I'll forget to tick it down. And then obviously we're in a bad board state. I'm sure there are other board games with transparent +1 tokens. Yeah. I don't know. I like a token. Like in Flesh and Blood, a go again token you put on your thing to be like, yeah, it has a go again, so we don't forget. Breakerless is my jam? Well, hey, I'm assuming there's a lot more bypass support. I used to bust up my wargaming dice and put credit amounts for my opponent. Yeah. Yeah, I think dice are a bit more controlled when it comes to organized play, but controlling your, like, marking your opponent's stuff, I think is fine. But dice are, I don't think tournament allowed because you can knock them over. Maybe, I'm not sure I have energy stats on that. Anyways, sorry I ended on that note. It's good that we have strong responses to things we've seen so far. A lot of the community stuff that we've seen has been really quite cool. Again, if you want to tune in, welcome to Rebellion Without Rehearsal. There is a whole track here of spoiler stuff that you can see, and anything that's been revealed on someone else's channel, we're not going to open because I want you to go there and participate in their stuff and their non-doomer takes. But today we've seen everything so far. So The Process put out something. It's a podcast. I listen to it. We see 4 HB cards. Slumscast I'll watch while doing editing or listen to while editing after the stream because I've still more work to do. Yesterday, Neon Static played with some Anarch cards in paper, which is fantastic. And Bod did a stream revealing very creative cards. I think it was 3 cards. Yeah, 3 cards, I want to say. 1 for each runner faction. And then it continues NSG. Null Signal Station starts tomorrow. We'll have a video up tomorrow. I'm hoping hoping at 11:15, but who knows how renders are going to go. And then NSG is going to have a preview of an extra Jinteki card, which is pretty sick. And then obviously continues. Very big thing too, if you want to get part of the conversation, these have been absolutely fantastic. Not only did Yusengren put out a really cool video recently talking about the best Netrunner meta ever, link in the description, but we have daily casts that have been going every day, inviting people on to talk about the upcoming cards. Patrick Sklar, you might know, I think is joining tonight, which is pretty sick. So there's going to be some cards to talk about, some HB stuff. And what does Slumscast have? 11:15, what time zone? My time zone, Eastern Standard, largely. And on top of that, we hit daylight savings, which you probably know. Maybe not all the world does it, but we're technically an hour ahead than we used to be. So for some people, the time of the stream starts might be slightly different. I try to do 11:15. Slum says NBN. Thank you. Okay, I'll check that out for sure. NBN cards are really important because I'm assuming we'll see some good support for Epiphany. -5. Yeah, I think it is -5 Oxy. I think that's correct. Simon, man, I want to drop by to say that anytime I see your stream, it makes me want to try the game more and more. It's like you hacked my brain or something, but I do find places where I live to try. No place. Simon, how's it going? Sorry, there's no place for you to try. If you want to try out, mind you, we play a lot, as you might know, in Jinteki.net. And getting involved online is an easy way to be like, hey, can someone teach me the game on green level clearance? That's the Discord channel. People are very excited. You can tag like a mentor and be like, hey, I want to learn the game and play online. A lot of people play the game exclusively online. That's not for everybody. Tabletop play, mind you, is easily the best way to play any card game. But Jinteki.net obviously is no slouch. And we spend a lot of time playing on there. So sorry, it's like that. Some cards are cool. Okay, cool. Eastern Daylight Time is UTC -4. Oh, Spiff, thank you. Yeah, we might be -4 right now because of the time zone change. I can't tell you what it is, but it's different than it used to be. Technically, it's -5. It might be -4 right now. Anywho, spoiler season. It's been sick. We have going to be more stuff to talk about. Mind you, Pat will be with us in person on Thursday to talk about some upcoming cards. The deck list of the week doesn't really make sense to play. But in terms of the cards we've seen so far, we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4 of these cards so far. Maybe we'll see the Piranha looking thing in Slumscast. I don't know. But check that out. Anyways, sorry I'm a doomer. Roast me if you want. It's fine. I'm scared. I don't like being Saisentan. Oh, but that's largely it. Again, the stream is going to be a bit shorter. Thanks so much for dropping in. Hopefully you're enjoying a good spoiler season. It's been really sick. Again, I love the fact that there's a lot of people, you know, in chats, in like the daily cast, watching streams for people revealing cards. We'll have something tomorrow. Pass with you on Thursday. Yeah, I know. I'm suspicious. Excited to get back into the game with this release after taking some time out to be a real Netrunner software engineer. Nick, oh, welcome back. It seems like a sick set. I'm really excited. Gabali, Recursion, and Seb, maybe? I don't think Gabali's worth recurring. The maybe you want it because the breaker suite is really strange, but it's really hard to make those cards worth recurring when you have access to like botchless recursion, right? Like there's just easier ways it feels like an Anarch to do that, let alone Banhar, mind you, is a connection. So that's pretty good. Saisentan, more like Daisentan. Okay. We'll see you hopefully tomorrow with spoilers. We have some cool stuff to show off. We've been working on a video, and then otherwise we'll be back on Thursday. So enjoy. Better watch out. I know. I'm scared. Anyways, thanks so much for hanging out. On that note too, bummer that I haven't had time to update this. This is, mind you, we're supported entirely on Patreon, and I wouldn't put so much time in spoiler stuff. I wouldn't be able to afford to put that much time into spoiler season if it wasn't from the support from all these folks, and of course our daily cast patrons as well. Thank you so much. Mind you, I haven't had time to update this because we've been in the render tank for a long time. There's a hedgehog. There you go. But thank you to all these names here, and of course the Daily Cast patrons. Our new patrons recently, Rohit, thanks so much for supporting the channel. Also Vectors recently joined. I haven't been able to update this. Hopefully we'll get that by probably not Thursday, but probably by next week. But really excited for that. And again, I said this before, but next week, again, we'll be here more than you think we will. You'll be annoyed because the new set comes out, and if it's on JNet as soon as Monday, we'll be streaming nearly every day of the week, if I'm not mistaken, at least the weekdays at a minimum. So we'll start with that. Sort order is wrong. Did I mess it up? Also, if you see your name here and you want to get your little nice little logo next to it, whether it's your local meta, your thumbnail icon that you like, any sort of customization, hit me up on Discord and we'll get it in there, which I think is a really fun touch. And I'm excited to make that more personalized to see how, the cool different people that like supporting the grid. On that note, if you want to like the video, it supports the channel a lot in a non-monetary way. That's an easy thing to do, or share. Zed is last. Oh, I see what you mean, Salva. Yeah, I know. I feel bad about that. I feel like I need to do a random sort because obviously 222 there at the top has got top billing for a long time now. It's just every time I have to do that or re-render. Maybe I'll re-render on a random thing. It's kind of hard to the way I set it up. I got a silly new runner. Nah, sorry, Tron. On Thursday for sure. I'm excited to see it. See you Thursday. Hey, see you Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your spoiler season. Take care. Ciao.